Okay, let's continue. We're at 3.03 now for teaching and learning, and again, as you all can see, we're really pressed for time, and as much as I hate to do this every month, I have to ask that we hit the big points at the beginning here, and then we receive the information in a timely manner that we are able to review it prior to the meeting, and that way we could ask questions for those areas of concern or clarity. Okay, so teaching and learning, Dr. King.
Chairman Houston, members of the board, 3.03 teaching and learning will consist of pre-assessment update, strategic plan update, along with PBIS update as well. Dr. Savigny.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and we conferred during the break and are going to work quickly to help us catch up with some time by condensing and hitting the high points as you suggested, Dr. Houston. We're excited to be able to share with you our update in regard to PBIS, and we have with us Dr. Elsie Harold-Lands and Ms. Renee Smith, who will bring us up to date. So, ladies.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Ms. Doyle, Dr. King, and members of the board. We were very excited about being able to share information with you about updates related to our Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports Framework, or PBIS. And as you know, we've been working for 3+ years to get to this point where we are implementing this evidence-based framework related to positive behavioral interventions and supports, and working on areas of school climate and behavior and other related things within our schools. And so just wanted to share some general information and touch on some important points. As you know, there are 3 expectations related to our work with PBIS, and those involve being respectful, responsible, and safe within our schools. And we believe that there's a direct effect, and evidence has supported that doing those things and teaching lessons related to those 3 areas has a definite impact on the climate and culture within our buildings. We've also noted that working in these particular areas may assist with reducing the likelihood of bullying and harassment within our buildings and across our school district. Wanted to point out briefly some of the ties to our work with the strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, and as you know that PBIS and our work with school climate is very instrumental within the plan, but also to tie a little bit of some of what we're currently doing related to PBIS to our active work with the Office for Civil Rights. As you know, as I mentioned, PBIS has been in the works for several years, and our current work with the Office for Civil Rights ties into that, enhances even the work that we have in place related to PBIS. Our work with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Center, our continued efforts related to safety and security with students and staff across the district, and some of our enhancements related to training and the development of a task force and other areas related to our work with Title IX, Section 504, and issues related to harassment, bullying, disability harassment, sexual harassment. Those particular areas are very much in alignment with the work that we've been doing over the years related to PBIS. Wanted to quickly point out some of the links to our work with the Office for Civil Rights and the tie to our framework dealing with PBIS, and I won't read all of those areas in the interest of time, but you note the first one, for example, some of the Tier 1 strategies dealing with firm, fair, and corrective actions related to discipline. Data is a very important part of the work that we're doing with PBIS, and information that we're collecting related to our work with our Office for Civil Rights and the partners with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Center and what they're doing to support us there. Explicit teaching of formal procedures throughout the district within our schools. Consistent practices related to all of these particular areas to enhance some of the work that we're doing through PBIS. Obviously, the continuous monitoring through the whole PBIS component, that framework, as well as monitoring efforts that we have with the Office for Civil Rights and the Mid-Atlantic Equity Center. And then, of course, problem solving is a big piece of how all of this ties together. And so just wanted to give you some pointers about our particular ties with our ongoing work. As you know, it's a multi-year framework and process to put all of this in place. And so Ms. Smith will continue the presentation with information related to some of the specific updates and data involving our work with the schools and the significant amount of training that she and our partners have worked to put in place in our district. Ms. Smith?
Okay, so for stages of implementation, our schools are either in initial implementation or full implementation. And the way that that is gauged is through what's called a SET, which is a school-wide evaluation tool, as well as benchmarks of quality, which is a fidelity tool for Tier 1. And I'm going to show you some data related to the SET, okay? These are the professional development goals for this school year when it comes to PBIS coaches and the teams as well as administrators. So you can see it's covering a wide variety of things, but we're going to talk about two of those specifically today. And we're talking about progress monitoring. When I sit in SGT meetings, progress monitoring, progress monitoring, progress monitoring. So we're working on that. We have shared a tool with the administrators and the teams, and it's a cost-benefit analysis. And basically what it does is it turns referral time into lost instructional time. It's an Excel. They can utilize that in meetings. And so here's some of the data. Again, this is 2 years because we have to be able to input everything into Synergy for me to pull a report for current data right now. And since some of our schools are still struggling just a little bit, it wouldn't be accurate, so we want to be cautious of that. So if we look at that, in 2012, 2013, there were 16,426 distinct student referrals, which means each one of those students received at least one referral. That's not counting if they had multiple referrals. And then it did go down to 13,846, so 3,000 of our students did not receive a referral the next year, which is significant for us. And if you look at the time, you can actually see how much time is lost, and this is based on an administrator spending 30 minutes on one referral, which is low number, very low minutes, and 20 minutes of student instructional time, which is extremely low. But we just wanted to show how it directly affects instructional time when you reduce referrals. And so between the 2 years, we actually gained 161 student instructional days back because of not having the referrals, and 108 administrative days. So it's extremely significant, and we've shared this with the administrators to help with implementation so they can see that it's worthwhile. These are the schools that have a completed set, which means that we went in to actually do an evaluation to check for fidelity. Richard Bowling, as you know, is in its third year of focus, and then Tidewater Park is now conditionally accredited. So that's why they have the asterisk there. You see the population of the school, what their set score was, and the referrals and so forth, and the percentage of the student population that received a referral. And then all the way to the right is the out-of-school suspension data based on their fidelity in implementing. 80% is implementing with fidelity. So you can see that our schools are doing well, and this is just at the rate I can get there to do the set. There's no real other reason, but these were some of the schools that I had marked for being ready for Tier 2 readiness. And so we went and did the evaluation. So it's based on data, not my opinion. The other thing that we've concentrated on this year is the school learning plan and InduStar goals, and the direct alignment of TAO 1, 2, and 3. As we know, Tier 1 is universal, what we do for all of our kids, and then Tier 2 and what we do for some, and then of course our top percentage that need individualized or intensive intervention. So TAO 1, we talk about decision rules and access to supports, the 3-tiered framework, and matching those interventions based on the needs of the students, and then using multidisciplinary teams and data-driven decisions, and progress monitoring. How did the children get to those interventions, and then how do they get to exit from those interventions? So what we did is these are the required indicators through InduStar and from the state. And so we're helping map on PBIS and the three-tiered framework onto that so that the schools can utilize this in their InduStar plans because it's the same process. The process of looking at data is the same. So PBIS is helping with one. We identify, understand, and clearly define the needs. TAO2 is carefully matching the needs of the continuum of evidence-based interventions. And then progress monitoring. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time here is, again, how do children get into the intervention, and then how do they exit the intervention? And those decision-making rules are going to be the same regardless in that process, whether you're talking about behavior or academics. And these are some of the readiness considerations for Tier 2. We actually have 12 schools that are receiving Tier 2 training. We are way ahead of the curve, way ahead. I think I've said this before, when you take the region, which is all of Hampton Roads, when you talk about Tier 1 fidelity, it's at like 69%. And Norfolk, in 1 year of full implementation, is at 68.6%. That's really unheard of. That's a credit to what they're doing in the schools and the emphasis that they're putting on it. So we did move about 12 of the schools up into an accelerated training cohort. However, the rest of our schools will still get the entrance into Tier 2 as well, and then any individual guidance that they need from me.
And as we close, just wanted to note quickly some next steps in terms of the PBIS framework. We will obviously continue extensive training across the district. There are additional implementation efforts, and Ms. Smith has worked with staff and with our TTAC partners in terms of an annual calendar training that covers the entire school year, and then enhanced support in terms of follow-through and follow-up actions related to the training that's scheduled throughout the year. The same in terms of our work with the Office for Civil Rights. We are partnering again with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Center to provide some support for us related to specific action steps that we have in place. When I mentioned the task force and some of the other components that we're doing extensive training, such as the training we had last week, and then following through with additional action steps that are part of our resolution agreement. We will work with both entities to make sure that we further enhance and support efforts in the strategic plan and align those with our PBIS efforts. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you.
Well,
I don't want to have the appearance of being critical of the PBIS program, but my question is, what anonymous or blinded data do you have thus far on teacher perception and implementation of PBIS? That's the first question. And then number two, we receive a lot of public comment about the inference that teachers may be asked to not write the referrals. And I see you shaking your head, but what I want is, I want blinded data telling me that that's not the case, or something to support that the referral rates are dropping because of the implementation of PBIS, which I want that to be the truth coming from it. So what can you tell me to support that?
I can tell you a couple of things, how we looked at the teacher data last year and how we're going to move forward this year. We do have the climate surveys that the district did, and I have pulled out the teacher safety and the certain components of those composite scores that directly affect teacher climate and how they feel in the building. So that's how we did it last year. This year, we're actually, our department, is going to actually develop those surveys for the teachers to go out and to be able to do that and be able to get it back. So that will actually be happening in January. So I will have some of that data for you then. PBIS as a framework in no way, just that's why I was shaking my head, says not to write a referral. But it does ask you to do a lot of other things first to help And some of our schools, depending on administration, use the referral in different ways. So some of our schools have other forms that they use that are what they would call a pre-referral form, that look at things like motivation, what's the function of the behavior, okay? And then by the time it gets to an NPS referral, that would be an automatic suspension. Does that make sense? So if they got the referral, it would turn into, they've already checked every box, the forms that Dr. King has been talking about, that these are all the interventions that we've gone through. We have principals who are actually monitoring those forms. So, and the reason why I say that is so when we look at referral data, it's going to be, it's not consistently done in the schools. Does that make sense? Right. So some of our schools may have 12 referrals in the system, but they also have 12 out-of-school suspensions. But that's not counting all of the other things that the teachers have done and what the school has done prior to that. So,
So hold on one second, let's back up.
mhm.
So you're saying that some schools have a different form for what they call a referral?
No, not
Not
they,
the-
no,
No.
like a pre-referral.
A pre-referral?
The way,
Okay.
because referrals, the way that we look at it within the framework is a data collection tool.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay.
That's what it is, so that when the schools are working with them, and these are primarily elementary, because the elementary teachers deal with so much in the classroom with procedures and processes and those types of things, that they deal with a lot of behaviors that are child behaviors, that are developmental. And that wouldn't warrant an NPS referral.
Okay,
So, but we're collecting data on that in
Okay.
case there's some trends.
okay.
Because if there's some trends, repeated behavior means usually adult. We need to possibly adjust something. And so they're collecting that data. Does that help clarify?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Can I
When you-
piggyback on that just for 1 second?
Go ahead.
So in the future, will we be able to get data that just shows at this school, these were the levels of behaviors, and then at another point in time, these are the levels of behavior, so we can look at behavior to behavior versus referral to referral?
Yes, and one of the things that we're working on this year is actually looking at and hoping that when we submit it, that you guys will approve a different type of form, so that data collection, but I didn't want to do that before Synergy came into play, because then I may have just recreated the wheel. So as we get Synergy and everything's perfect with it, and then we'll revise that form so that then we're collecting data consistently the same way across the district.
So just to recap what I've heard about the survey, at some point in time this year,
Yes.
you're going to be collecting data from teachers. It's specifically going to be, this is PBIS that we're going to be getting information back on, and
Yes.
it'll be anonymous in some
Yes.
way, shape, or form.
And it won't be
Okay.
coming from the school, so they may not feel, they may be more honest with it and
Okay.
feel like the administrator's not going to
Okay.
see it and those types of things in
Okay.
case there's any of those
Okay.
issues there.
Okay. I just think that's good, because we want to be implementing a program like this which has such good impact on the students, and we want to be following through and making sure that the teachers are embracing the concept, and if they're not embracing the concept, what can we do to make it better for them, because they're the ones that are in the classrooms managing the setting. And you're right, time taken away to deal with a disruptive behavior is time taken away from a student's education, and we do not want that to happen in North Public Schools.
And that's why there's ongoing PD, ongoing. We do pull them out. We talk about behavior management strategies and classroom management strategies as well.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify that, as Ms. Smith mentioned, and during the multiple training sessions that we've had over time, PBIS offers a variety of different forms and types of tools that schools can use. And so Ms. Smith and our T-TAC partners have worked with staff to try to streamline that. And as she mentioned, we're working to make sure that we have those streamlined even further, but to make sure that it's clear that our referral process and that the NPS referrals, that there is consistency with that and the manner in which they're utilized. Yes.
I think it's also important as a board for us to realize that with the implementation of anything, and I mean literally anything, our 3,000 teachers, you might hear 10 or 15 folks say, almost anything. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be funny. And I'm not saying you disregard what people say, but I think you have to put it in context in terms of the whole, and be careful how we react to, especially when you implement change.
If they know that they're going to be able to give feedback,
Mhm.
that their feedback will be heard,
Sure.
that the actions will be taken based upon their feedback,
Mhm.
they will be more receptive of being a part of the solution. And then what they will do the next following year is they will be keeping a log in their mind. I know I'm going to be asked questions about this. What can I remember so that I can contribute to the benefit of this program?
You sound
know.
like a human behavior specialist.
I mean, I live by numbers with what I do, and so do many other people on the board. So it's very important for us to get accurate data so that we can help to make good decisions.
I think that's why a survey is such a good idea, because you can get large numbers of data, just not anecdotal, half a dozen people.
Right.
And just a reminder, this is a relatively new program.
Mm-hmm.
And to get full implementation and full fidelity of the program, it's going to take time. And if you've tried any new thing, from learning the computer to driving to hitting a golf ball, it's frustrating at first until you get used to it and practice at it and get good at it. And it's going to take time. And I think the teachers, and from what I've seen in Loudoun County, and I go back to Loudoun County, that they have implemented it to such a degree that it is widely accepted as the norm, is the way to go. So I'm excited about this program.
I also think getting some consistency across the district in terms of practice is also important. When they're doing different things at different schools, it's hard to get a culture change, a culture shift.
Yeah.
And I know it's easier said than done.
Great skills,
I certainly realize that. But I think that would be helpful, Ed and Warren.
Yeah, I know that getting data on this particular area is probably very difficult, but there is the research that shows that the faithful implementation of the PBIS also has academic results, that the academics rise. And so, when I look at the stats that you have on Tidewater Park, and the fact that Tidewater Park is doing well academically, but they also have a low number of referrals and out-of-school suspensions, which indicates that's feeding into their academic success. So I'm really pleased to be able to see that, and this trend of trying to prevent the preschool to prison pipeline, the pushing out of students. I think the PBIS is an answer to that. My concern also lies in the area of the Tier 3 students who have the tremendous number of referrals, and hoping that because of this system that we would see better response to these type of Tier 3 students and see less of them. So those are my comments.
And part of the Tier 1 strategies are to, the same with instruction, is if you have explicit instruction, whatever it is, if it's to change a tire, whatever it is, you have a much better chance that the children are going to receive it. And so when they actually got the Anita Archer book, Explicit Instruction, on our PBIS teams. Explicit instruction is explicit instruction. It works, whether it's behavior, whether it's academics, and them learning how to do it behaviorally may boost their ability to do it academically. So we're not separating the process, and we give them tools and resources that are both academic and behavioral, social, emotionally related.
Are our high schools buying into this PBIS system?
We're getting there.
Okay.
How about that? as an answer. We're getting there. It's difficult at the secondary level. It really is. They've got credit bearing time and other things. It's difficult. They have to get pretty creative. But we're getting there.
But we're expecting to see our students rise up from elementary to middle school
Yeah.
with this philosophy that will go into the high schools.
Yes, and
I will-
that will be exciting.
Also, just recently, all of our high schools participated in a state training where additional tools were shared with a number of districts across Virginia, and all of our high schools participated in that related to a full day of PBIS training in Richmond recently.
Thank you.
Warren, then we're gonna
I
have
ask for consideration of
Explore
integration. I love Dr. King's initiative for school safety, for student safety. I love that proactive approach is PBIS, and I use it individually. The reactive approach, what I'm pleased is the addition of the bullying, anti-bullying number.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
628-1178.
Yes.
I like the addition of that. The proactive preparation of folks in the positive side is great part of the major initiative that you present. The reactive side is something that I was pleased. For the past 3 years, we've asked the students in the community to use the crime line number when they see a crime. This year, thank you for putting in the school handbook that crime line number, 188 lock you up,
Yes.
because there are crimes. So reactively, I'd like there to be the option of students, all 30-plus thousand of them, to when they see a crime, to be part of the solution. And I'm calling that the student-supported safety net. So, just for consideration, no response to me necessary, how, as we're asking for the proactivity and the PBIS, to make sure they know of those two numbers when they see a crime, I want to make sure that all 30-plus thousand of our students are part of the solution if and when the reactive becomes necessary. But thank you for both prongs, Dr. King. Thank you for all that you do, and I'm asking for consideration on how to integrate the
Yes, sir.
reactive with the proactive. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We will roll into our pre-assessment presentation, so I will invite Dr. Bailey and our coordinator team to join us.
They look like they ready to go to bed. All right.
Excuse me.
Sure who has the clicker down there, but is the clicker in front of you, Bruce? Or Monica, if you'll just click it and advance us, please. We want to share with you tonight in a very abbreviated, quick fashion the pre-assessment results. And at our agenda planning session last month, we were asked to focus the content or the bulk of the presentation on what we're doing now as a result of the pre-assessment. But we do want to share with you a little bit of how we have gotten to this point. The teaching and learning team and our coordinators, our 4 content coordinators are sitting at the table. They have done tremendous work over the last 2 years, and they have worked themselves day and night, revamping and revising and rehashing and rewriting and creating and working with teacher teams. So we owe them a tremendous thank you in regard to the work that they have done to get us to this point, and the things that this team has done are listed on the screen, and it's because of their leadership and their content expertise that we've been able to get from point A to point B. So I wanted to publicly thank you all for that. Dr. Corbin's just had to step out because of a child care issue, but she works very closely with our content coordinator, so thank you for that. And there's also been a tremendous amount of professional learning that has taken place in regard to all of the changes that have taken place with the curriculum and the assessment guides and the pre-assessments and the post-assessments and the benchmarks and the common formative assessments and the differentiated instruction and the formative assessment. There's been much professional learning that is not drop in the bucket. It is ongoing and sustained, so it is something that's provided and reinforced and moved forward and revisited and reinforced, and we're going into classrooms to monitor that as well, to make sure that that is taking place and translating into classroom practice. So the bulk of our presentation today is to share with you what we've gleaned from the pre-assessments. And we believe very strongly in pre-assessments because it allows us to look at where our students are when they cross the threshold of our classrooms to begin with. And it's to let us gauge readiness for learning. It's important for all of us to remember that the pre-assessments are given before the instructional delivery has taken place. They happen at the beginning before the learning has occurred, but it allows us to establish a baseline. If we'll advance to the next slide, and our teachers use that to create their lesson plans, to group students, to look at the abilities and what the students already know so we can group them accordingly. And then it also allows teachers to begin to implement those safety nets on day one, so that we're looking at students who are in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 according to those score bands. So at that point, I'll be quiet and turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
Very quickly, we thought it was important to share some information to you, and some of the documents that you have received on the data just reflects percent proficiency, which is the green bar information. But we thought we would give you a full picture of where the other percentage of students are, which is needs improvement and does not meet. We have provided an additional handout for you to look at another point in time. However, I do want to point out to you that this particular chart shows you the pre-assessment for an elementary school for grades 3 through 5 for math and reading, and then at the bottom, hot off the press, are our monthly assessment information for the month of October. And so you can see that certainly the pre-assessment, as Dr. Savigny mentioned, before instruction, and then the October monthly assessment after instruction has occurred, and this is how our students have performed based on what they have been taught. And so at this point, we'll move on into our content areas so that you can hear about the focus, the next steps, and so forth.
Good afternoon, good evening. In terms of our focus this year for English, I think we all focus on unpacking the standards and ensuring that alignment between the written and the taught curriculum. As Dr. Savigny alluded to, we did a lot of work with working with our curriculum, revising our curriculum to ensure that it was user-friendly for our teachers, but also guaranteed to provide success for our students. And so one of the problems that we noted was that our teachers had a hard time looking at the standards as given in the framework and unpacking them. And so one of the things that we did was to really focus on training with unpacking the standards. After we did observations, we found that teachers still struggled with it. And so we began to unpack them for them because we wanted to ensure that instruction went forth, whether the teachers were prepared to unpack them or not. Can you go back one? I'm sorry. And then we began working on writing instruction. Our first all-staff day, the whole focus was on writing instruction with an emphasis on narrative, expository, and persuasive forms. We know that the 5th grade writing test was deleted by the state of Virginia, but we also knew that it was still a standard that had to be taught, and we knew that writing still needed to go on in elementary school. And so even in our elementary instruction earlier this year, we've still continued to focus on writing. We wanted to ensure that we found one strategy that could be used across grade levels vertically, so that we decided on close reading and an analysis of literal and figurative elements using annotation, summarization, justification in fiction and nonfiction text. We selected close reading because it is a strategy that can be used in elementary, middle, and high school. And when used with fidelity, the students have the ability to not just read text and comprehend text, but to also analyze text. The basis of it is a purposeful rereading of text. And then we also focus, based on our data from our SOL test from the previous year, we continue to focus on Greek and Latin roots and word study. Again, with the focus of unpacking the standards, identifying the main idea. Again, the focus on the main idea came from our data from the SOL test from the previous year. Also summarizing and supporting details, and then locating information in a text to support opinions, predictions, and conclusions. And all of this came from the data from last year's SOL test, and we used the student performance by question report so that we could drill down closely to the specific areas of weaknesses our students demonstrated last year.
And something that we noticed is that we need to work with the teachers who work with students with disabilities. We needed to help them understand how to unpack the standards, take that information and write standards-based IEPs that focus on the deficits and essential skills. And some of the essential skills are very similar to the essential skills that were just mentioned in the area of English. Cause and effect, reading strategies to monitor comprehension through the reading process, identifying main idea, making simple inferences, and in writing, using pre-writing strategies to generate or organize ideas.
And so with our professional development, again, we continue with the unpacking of standards and lesson plan design. We're still working with the assessments. One of the things that changed this year is that the English and Math department, we provide monthly district assessments. And so that's been something that our department has worked with, as well as the Math department, to ensure that we have that data monthly. Also planning for mastery. We've worked with power planning with the teachers. We've gone in, matter of fact, one of my specialists was in a building today actually teaching the classroom. Sometimes you can show them and tell them, but sometimes you have to demonstrate it. And so my specialists have planned with the teachers, but they've also taken over and actually taught lessons to model it for the teachers. We focused on before and during and after strategies. We continue with writing instruction. And one of the things that we found with writing instruction is that different teachers would give different grades to different assessments. And so one of the things that we've done is provided training with collaborative scoring, where we all sit around and score papers together so that we can ensure that we're all understanding the tenets of the rubrics together. And then classroom coaching and modeling, as I spoke about before. So again, in terms of our focus for priority schools, it's still instructional observations, and we don't just do a checklist for our observations. We give a summary of what we saw. We give a very prescriptive guidelines for what they need to do to correct any deficiencies, and then we offer follow-up by going back in the room and modeling and coaching in those areas. And then we also do grade level strategic planning in the buildings with those schools that are in priority and focus status.
Students with disabilities, we piggybacked off of learning support this year. There were mandatory sessions, and we recommended that the teachers attend the mandatory sessions. Then we created part one in addition to what they did, and that was provided in August. And part one addressed what happens next after the lesson, after the standard is unpacked. Basically, how do you write a good present level of performance? How do you take that information, write a goal that works with the deficit of the skill area, and then take that information and write a lesson plan. And then we also provided, during the October 2nd professional development, lesson plan design and how to do progress monitoring. Word study and reading comprehension, we have teamed up with, we have teamed up with, okay.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Denise Thomas, Senior Coordinator with Learning Support. Okay. I'm sorry.
We're glad to meet you.
Okay. Word study and reading comprehension, we have teamed up with TTAC ODU. The first training, we have a group of teachers from Norfolk, and TTAC agreed and provided us with a block of seats. And we have created a professional learning community with these teachers. First training was last Friday. There's another training in December, and it's based on word study. We are following up and providing observations, follow-up training, observation, follow-up training in the area of word study, working with students with disabilities. And the second part is reading comprehension, which is going to start in January, and it's going to be the same thing. ongoing training in standards-based IEP writing, and classroom coaching and modeling. We are participating in focus walks and doing observations and training, lesson planning, especially design instruction. That depends on the needs of the school and also depends on the individual needs of teachers based on observation and feedback. And then again, progress monitoring of IEPs, because if that standards-based IEP is written closely to the essential skills, there should be a match. So if the students are making progress on the IEP, you should see progress on the essential skills. So we're working with making sure the teachers understand how to align it properly.
Hi, Bart Irwin, work with mathematics. The state organizes math instruction into 5 or 6 strands, and so that's how we're looking at our data in terms of where the gaps are. You'll notice they actually were from the pre-assessment, they mimicked what we saw in the SOL results from the spring, and so we're not happy with that, but we are, the alignment affirms what we've seen, and so we're good to go with that. We feel like we have good targets. Those targets are in grades 3 through 8 specifically. The SOLs that deal with computation and estimation are low. That is something that's been around for a while, but we are continuing to have the gaps there with everything dealing with computation estimation. In measurement on 3.5 specifically is low. Measurement in geometry is reported together on an SOL. The pre-assessment allowed us to see some difference between the two. Geometry, especially at our elementary grades, showed up relatively higher, so we're able to hone down a little bit and focus it more on the measurement piece than the geometry. Number sense has traditionally been our lowest performing. We've seen some gains there in the elementary level, so you'll notice I just tagged it at 6.8. By no means are we where we need to be at elementary, but it shows up as a dramatic gap, specifically in 6.8. That's your percents, your ratios, your fractions, anything that's dealing with reasoning related to the whole in 6.8. And then our problem solving across the board. The application of the knowledge that I have, how do I use that? We're including all of our TEI items within problem solving, what the elementary calls story and our upper grades called word problems, anything involved with reasoning with the problem.
And students with disabilities, we are seeing some of the same things. Difficulty with multi-step problems, problem solving, fractions, and I stay in Bert's office, or I'm always calling or sending emails for them to provide us with additional information so that we can help move the students forward in the area of math.
The next steps, some of them are repeated, so I can skip over those. The unwrapping of the standard, dealing with formative assessment, and also our formal assessments at the end. We are looking at and stressing the need for a good daily math review structure. We cannot just wait until we have a lot of standards to cover. This is how we're going to try to attack our measurement and geometry, which traditionally are not taught until the January-February range in the calendar. A math review structure that allows them to activate prior knowledge ahead of time. We're trying to implement that earlier on to keep things alive and ready on in their memory, that they're not waiting a year to get it. Problem-solving activities across the board. Any kind of open-ended, rich problem solving where the students are asked to do more than just provide an answer, but provide reasoning. The modeling piece with the fraction computation, particularly in our middle grades, not enough to just know an algorithm, but you've got to be able to draw it, you've got to be able to explain it, and we're working with teachers to help them with that, as well as with the rule of 4. Again, the same complexity, that an algebra problem is no longer simply graph this line, but we need to be able to show it graphically, verbally, algebraically, and we're working with teachers on developing that.
Students with disabilities, again, as you can see, unpacking the standards, we need to make sure everything's aligned. We have a book talk currently that we're working with ODU TTAC. It's titled Teaching Inclusive Mathematics to Special Learners K-6. We have 25 teachers in Norfolk currently signed up with the book talk, and this book describes the characteristics of students with disabilities. Then it provides strategies, and what we're doing is showing them how to take the strategies, write a lesson plan using the MPS template, and then we're going to be with TTAC going into the schools to help them implement that lesson plan in the area of math. So at this time, we have 25 teachers signed up. And again, problem-solving activities. I have a meeting with TTAC tomorrow where we're going to be focusing in on how to work with students with disability in the area of problem-solving. And again, same thing with observation, feedback, follow-up training, lesson planning, focus on doing that laser-like focus, and progress monitoring of IEPs.
I'm Bruce Brady, the coordinator for History Social Science, and we're doing much of the same thing. We're in the schools, we're observing, we're reviewing assessment data, we're working with individual teachers, with grade level teams, secondary, we're working with subject area teams or entire departments to provide whatever assistance and instructional guidance is necessary, whether it's lesson planning, checking for understanding, engaging strategies to engage students with the history so that it's not sit and get, but they're actively involved. And so whatever we need to do to meet the needs of the teachers and schools. We're very intensely focusing at the elementary level on Virginia Studies, at the middle school level on civics, because with the changes that the state has made in eliminating some of the history, social science, SOL tests, elementary school and middle school's entire history accreditation will be riding on that test at each of those schools. And so we want to make sure that our schools are successful when it comes to SOL testing.
And I'm Adrienne Britton for Science. And likewise with my colleagues, I'm focusing on the 3 topics as described by the district. But in addition to that, we're looking at scientific investigation. This reporting category has been an area of concern for not only our district, but for the state. And it's primarily because of the lack of hands-on experiences. So I'm building the capacity of teachers at the elementary level with the assistance of the Department of Education for the state to build scientific inquiry skills. The skills that are needed for scientific inquiry actually begin in pre-K, and mastery for some of these sub-objectives will not be attained until physics. So I encourage the elementary teachers to teach science and have provide an opportunity for science, because they're going to build the foundation for our physics students as 11th and 12th graders. In addition to scientific investigation, I focus as well on reading comprehension. And with that, our secondary teachers have been strategically trained to teach before, during, and after reading strategies. And right now, every secondary teacher currently has a copy of Power Tools for Adolescent Literacy to ensure that they have this toolkit as a resource that should be used and is being currently used in planning sessions. So as we talk about professional development, we ensure that in addition to those 3 topics, that we are providing hands-on opportunities with activity before content, providing students with the opportunity to explore before the lecture type of presentation, and then of course with formative assessments. Ensuring that students are mastering concepts bit by bit as they're being presented. And as my colleagues have stated, we too, the science office too, is in the buildings and providing instructional observation and feedback. We're planning with teachers, we're modeling lessons, and doing whatever it takes to ensure that our students are successful.
And in conclusion, I just want to draw your attention back to the sample report that Dr. Bailey gave you because it speaks to this quote. We're very much committed to making sure that we can boil down to the individual student level exactly what they have mastered and where we need to target our very specific and focused instruction. So this is a sample report that Dr. Bailey pulled from Schoolnet. If I were a building principal or a classroom teacher, then I could click on the green band and all the students that had demonstrated proficient on that particular assessment would pop up and I could create my groups accordingly. If I click on the yellow band, then the students who are not quite there yet pop up and I can create my groups accordingly, and the same with the red. So this particular tool allows us to drill directly down to the student level, and we can group according to what has been demonstrated in regard to what students have gleaned, who needs enrichment, who needs to have another opportunity and a reteaching. So all of our schools, this comes from Schoolnet, and this is the mechanism by which we are monitoring and utilizing our data to meet the needs of our individual students. Questions?
Reverend Haywood and I went to a session, I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, on, I guess, data presentations at for a board. And part of what we saw allowed for us to see pretty easily how we're doing at a district level, but also how we could see how different schools are doing. And I know that Dr. Bailey and her team are good at doing that. Is in some way, I guess, moving forward as we look at these reports and I guess in specific to some of the items we'll be looking at with our MOUs to really just get some type of data snapshot that shows, I guess, what you feel we ought to be doing and then how one school is doing in comparison to another. I mean, just quickly looking through Schoolnet, you can just see that some schools are very high in some levels, some schools are very low in other levels, but just try to get a sense of that. And then when you're doing the pre-assessments and you have schools at different levels, is there a expectation that you have when they take the pre-assessment, or is it really just completely, let's just see where they are? Is it something that you think you might see and therefore that it tells you something, or not?
Yeah, I can speak to mathematics. We don't have a target number on the pre-assessment only because it's instruction that is yet to come, right? So we don't have that target, but we are looking for those trends relative to one another. So again, even if the pass rate is far below where we ideally want to be, if it's higher than its correlated pass rate of another strand, that's kind of what we're looking for, to see are the same gaps and weaknesses there that we can structure instruction around in the coming months for mathematics.
And for English, some of our skills, such as summarizing main idea, inferencing, drawing conclusions, are things that begin as early as 3rd grade and then they rotate up or cycle up all the way to 12th grade. And so if we see that that's an issue in 3rd grade or 4th grade, we already know from the beginning where we need to focus our professional development, modeling, and coaching efforts.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I noticed, that in the English, that there were some significant percentage of students who obviously were grasping at a pre-assessment level the minute they walked into the classroom. And on math, it was almost none, and that's what I was trying to.
Well, English is the only K-12 straight alignment. From kindergarten to 12th grade, there's a direct vertical alignment in English, and unfortunately, it's not that way based on the state framework and all the other subjects.
If you could pick a 5th grader in a math assessment would have a fraction addition problem. They've never seen that before.
So I see that we have data year over year. Have you, I'm sure you have you analyzed it such that, are we in a better position even with pre-assessment this year than last year to know that we're starting out in a stronger position or at a perhaps not as strong position?
We do feel that we're at a stronger position. Certainly, we've changed our structure of assessing at our elementary level. by request. After the pre-assessment level, they wanted to have monthly assessments to get a shorter version of our 9-week benchmark assessment so that they could help students master the objectives and not just at the minimum, which is what our SOLs test for. And so we do feel that we are in a better position at this point as we're monitoring student progress each month as we go to the end of the year.
And then, if you don't mind, another question. So, Dr. King, at this point, at what point in the year do you see where either a priority of focus or another school might not be at the level of learning yet, where if we don't intervene now, we may not be successful at the end of the year? And how are you thinking about reallocating resources, adding teachers, interventionists, wraparound services, whatever, just to make sure that we can catch them up as quickly as possible before it's almost too late?
That's actually ongoing. It's not something that you wait for an accumulated amount of data or stats, because even on the front end, as you take a look at implications after the pre-assessment is given, of course, the pre-assessment really is, as they stated, an assessment or a diagnostic that tells you, for lack of a better way to say it, readiness to receive the curriculum. And then teachers teach. After teachers have taught, we're looking for a 4 to 8 week snapshot. So to answer your question, that first snapshot could tell you that you're not on track, you know.
And are we like moving truly interventionists into those schools right then and there?
Individual school level decision making, along with this team and the executive directors, should enter into that type of decision making, and it could run the gamut in terms of what the decision may be. But this, you know, these types of reports are key because it allows you to drill down to the individual student and the actual domain or element that is important for the child. And so what we would be looking for would be caseloads linked to these reports. You know, if that 4 to 8 week snapshot said to you that probability and statistics was a problem for Sam King, then there should be some evidence that Sam King was placed into some form of a safety net or reteaching or a double block or extended block. Or if it was that the school had a common thread across a certain concept where you had a number of students that had that same problem, then it could be what you alluded to earlier, that we bring in that math coach for a group of students to pull out or push in. So what I'm saying is that that approach is pretty fluid and it should be ongoing. I guess one could assume that by the holiday season, where we're around December in that area, where we've had a certain amount of time to gather information and statistics, and we look at an analysis across time for students, then we could begin to form some type of assumption about where we think we need to even further ramp up services or further accelerate services. But if we do this work the way that we should, throughout each intervention or throughout each snapshot, if we respond to it quickly and ensure that the student masters and then the student moves on, then that's what tells us that the student at the end of the school year should be able to master on an SOL type test or assessment. Any additional besides that? Outside?
Something to it. We are, with reading and math, doing those monthly assessments so that we're not waiting for that 8-week mark. And that's new this year, and that was a collaborative decision made by the team and building principals. So we're doing a monthly math assessment and a monthly English assessment. So there's a quicker spot check, so to speak, to make sure that mastery is progressing forward. And I thought I heard your question originated with focus and priority schools.
Well, that or frankly, any schools that you're
And
seeing.
part of what we're doing with that SGT process on a monthly basis is meeting as a large team, and many of these folks are on those SGT teams, meeting in the schools and doing exactly that with their data. I don't know if Dr. Williford wants to speak to that, but that is what the SGT process is, to review that data and structure those interventions right then.
And I'll just speak, to it. I think everyone has said the same things, but it links directly to the cycle for results. And looking at the data that's taking place monthly, being able to analyze that data as a team and adjust instruction immediately and get support immediately into the school, looking both at the student data, teacher observation data as well, all centered around just inspecting what we expect. So we don't wait until it's a need. It's a continuous process, and we've been at it now since the beginning of the school year, and we're looking forward to increase results from implementing the process.
That's probably just leading to my ultimate question, which is, as we enter into the budget season, certainly let us know as a board if you have enough resources to do what you're needing to do to meet the needs of the students that you're identifying that are not quite where they need to be. Because if you don't have the resources, then let's figure out how we get the money in the budget to ramp those up.
And that really speaks to appropriate use of safety net dollars that the board has already allotted to us, and for schools to make the request for those. And we want to ensure that they're appropriately used,
Right.
so that we are receiving a return on that investment.
Right.
And that's what I mean by it being a formative process, a fluid process. We certainly do not want to wait until the end of a semester or end of a period to determine that someone needs a safety net.
Right.
I mean, that's why that 4 to 8 week snapshot, those snapshots are extremely important, and we should give those safety nets throughout. And if they need more resources in terms of staff to push in, or whatever the case might be, that request should be made via that learning team or that PLC in that school for budgeted, attached to a budget request for safety net dollars. And then if we exhaust that part of money, then we should be talking about that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Looks like
They came and got it, they took it.
And we'll move quickly into the strategic planning. I think they're, in the essence of time, since you've had this, I'll hit a couple of slides and then answer any questions that you may have. As you are aware, we've pulled the district team back together 2 times in October to review the strategic plan as a whole. And we worked with Dr. Bill Cook, who came in and facilitated those conversations from the outside to allow us to have a truly objective look and to provide some analysis in regard to where we are with the team. And I'll share with you in just one second some of the outcomes of those 2 meetings with our district team. But in the meantime, we have, just as a reminder, met with our district team, and there are many dates listed on the screen since we began this process in 2012. So we've interacted with that district team, or the microcosm of the community, many, many times over the past 2 years, and will continue to work with them. We have our next session will take place in January, where we will pull that team back together on January 22nd to review the work that's taking place right now with our action teams. Part of what we did with them is to review their roles and responsibilities and point out that that district team is there as an advisory body for the superintendent in the strategic planning process. And then really reemphasize the fact that all of our action plans are specifically written and to focus on the strategic gap, and that the district team focuses on the things that are in the blue, and then the superintendent's team focuses on the things that are in yellow, which are the action plans. Part of what the team did was review each of our base plan components. So with the community beliefs, there are no recommended changes coming forward from the district team. With the mission, there are no recommended changes coming forth from the district team. With our parameters, there are no recommended changes coming forth from the district team. From the objectives, there are no changes coming forth from the team. Although Dr. Cook did make the suggestion to the district team that we wanted to look at creating performance indicators to go with these objectives versus trying to, Mr. Jordan's laughing, instead of trying to create performance indicators to go with each action plan. And we and Mr. Cook, or Dr. Cook was here last week working with the district team. That conversation came up again, and we told him that we would revisit that in earnest when he returns in January, just so the board is aware. He thought it made sense too. With the strategies, there are 2 recommended changes. With strategy 4, there is a recommended change, and we're not bringing these to you today to vote. These are just the recommended changes that are on the table. To change the word host in strategy 4 to create and maintain, and then in strategy 5 to end the strategy after the word justice. So there's simply a period there, and then through continuous improvement would roll off. Felt like that was leading the strategy into the planning part, and it's simply inherently implied through the wording. A big piece of the conversation that the team focused on when we were together in October was looking at what we believed was missing from the plan. And one of the things that resonated very loudly was there was not a strategy that was specific to student achievement. So again, this is a recommendation. The district team has not voted on the wording of this particular strategy yet, but the essence is here, having a 6th strategy that focuses specifically on student achievement. So to that end, we pulled together at the district level on October 28th, a district team pulled together the action team leaders again and assigned team leaders for strategy 6. Spent the morning working with Dr. Bill Cook going through the action team leader component, and we actually went in and reviewed each and every one of our action plans and looked at it from one of 5 perspectives in terms of, is it operational, is it relevant, does it need to be revised, should it be deleted, or should it be shifted to the new strategy. And you can see the breakdown on the screen of the plans that we reviewed, and we reviewed all 155 of them. 34 of them were deemed to be operational, meaning they are how we do business, and it was Dr. Cook's recommendation that those plans roll out or phase out of the current approach. 76 of them were still deemed to be relevant and timely. 28 of them have gone back to committee, so to speak, to look at updating and enhancing and making sure that all of our transformation initiatives are explicitly highlighted and outlined within the action plans. 7 will be deleted, and 10 will roll to the new strategy 6, and there are action teams that will be identified for each of the 6 strategies to complete this work through the next few weeks. The deadline for the action team leaders and their teams to have their updated, revised, or new action plans back to the district is January 8th. And then we will pull the district team back together on January 22nd so that we can present all of those action plans to the district team. So at this point, we've got a lot going on. There's exciting things going on with the action plans and with the strategic plan. We are in the process of beginning our first quarterly preparation to share with you in December where we are on each of the year 2 plans. All of the action plans are being updated or revised or gone back to committee, so to speak, and will be turned in January. As I said, the district team comes back together on January 22nd. All of our schools are in the process of creating their plans, and their action plans are due in May. And then at this point, all of the year 2 plans have been transferred from the spreadsheet management into board docs. And as of today, all of the baseline and target data has been implemented into those plans with the exception of one plan. and that is plan number 32, and that is the CFA data. And we were having an internal conversation as to whether we wanted to put the pre-assessment data there or wait just another week and put the first benchmark assessment for math and language there. So that will be up within the next couple of days. And then once that is up and we're beginning to get that input from our action team leaders and the persons who are responsible for the individual plans, that status bar that was on each of the plans last year will be added, and we will have that up before we do our first presentation to you in December. Okay, questions?
The strategic plan that's, can be accessed through the NPS website. It would be helpful if we could have the year. I know that it has start date, completion date, columns on there. It would be helpful to have the year also attached to it, since we're in a 5-year implementation.
And
If that's,
we
you
can
know.
certainly do that, but at this point, the year 1 plans and the year 2 plans have been identified. The other plans are in what we call the 3 to 5 year hopper. They have not been phased out yet. As we move a little bit closer into the budget planning cycle, then as a cabinet, we will look at those plans that are in that 3, 4, 5 hopper.
Oh, I mean, like, when it says start date July 1, 2013.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I
July,
got
you know, and
That's
then
an easy
end.
fix. We can
It's
do
very
that.
easy, but just so that it's, to keep the years straight,
Yes.
it would be helpful to have that
Thank
on
you.
there.
Good
Yep.
point.
Respectfully, we had a chat before this.
Yes, we did.
You can give Dr. Cook my cell phone number, 757-679-4444. Respectfully, I have what I think is a big item, a medium item, and 24 small items.
Okay.
You know about some of them.
Yes.
And we had a chat before.
Yes.
The big item is, if we have time to talk about milestones, which are items that the school board has either approved or by consensus over the past 6 years that are not, that conversation is not completed.
No.
Remember, I see the strategic plan as something that's growing. So I'm not certain that anyone in the room doing the planning was there for the past 6 years and can understand the importance of those things. So I'm going to need the assurance that anything coming out of that final discussion, if we have it, should be included.
Yes, sir.
That's the large item. The medium item, 2 policy items. You know what they are. Dr. Cook can call me, because if he or the group disagrees, perhaps we can have a chat. Sorry to be so kind of indirect. But the 24 small items, again, it's fair to have disagreements over format. But again, if Dr. Cook and the group does not believe that they're useful, I hope that my support for this entire plan, many of the items are excellent, would not be put in jeopardy by any obstinance regarding any judgment I call obstinance regarding the format consideration. But the big item is, are the milestones in there? The medium item is, does this group understand that they're not a policymaking body?
Yes.
You know what that is.
Yes.
We talked about that.
Yes.
And then the issue of the parallel format, which I think only makes sure that there's no question of the document at a small level. And again, I say all those things respectfully.
Point taken. Thank you.
The others? All right, thank you very much, Dr. Savigny. Okay, we move on to 3.04, school leadership development. Dr. King?
Chairman Houston, members of the board, school leadership development, 3.04 will consist of school improvement update as well as a Norview High School update. We will begin with Mr. Corbin, followed by Dr. Williford.
Good evening. I would like to share with you some of the events that took place at Norview High School and how NPS and others have reacted and what our next steps are in terms of the events that have taken place. To begin with, the events have taken place over roughly a 2-week period. The week of October 20th through 24th was homecoming week. On Tuesday of that week, a regularly scheduled fire drill took place. No problems occurred. Students went in, went out, and students came back in without any problems. On Wednesday, the following day, 3 different fire alarm pulls took place by 4 different students that disrupted class time for about 15 to 20 minutes each event. Dr. Staley, after that day, made announcements and informed the entire student body the issues that resulted from it, and warned students the consequences and how serious those consequences would be. On Thursday, there were no problems. On Friday, an electrical panel tied to the elevator system overheated and tripped a sensor, setting off the fire alarm. Students evacuated, the fire department responded, the power was cut to the panel, and students were out of class for that event for approximately 25 minutes. Again, students handled it pretty well. However, a short time later, during the 4th lunch period, a student again pulled an alarm. Students at that time, because they were in lunch, some took food and drinks out to the parking lot. Because it was determined to be a short or a false alarm, the all clear was given, and all but about 175 to 200 students re-entered the building. During the time the students were outside, milk containers were thrown at different groups, which set off students becoming angry. Some students felt disrespected, and it led to verbal exchanges and ultimately several physical assaults and fights, students running from one exchange to the other. After approximately 20 to 25 minutes of administrators, security, and police encouraging students to re-enter the building, the doors were closed and locked. Entry points were locked down to protect the integrity within the building and to keep the over 1,600 students who made the good choice of returning to class safely. The majority of the students who stayed outside were either ultimately the ones fighting, boosting the fighting, filming the actions taking place, or generally observing. School dismissed about 8 to 10 minutes early that afternoon once all buses arrived, and the campus then ultimately was cleared. A parent link reverse phone call was made to parents to provide factual information to let them know the events of that day. Following that, a debriefing then took place involving administration, NPS security, Norfolk police, and other staff on the scene to determine what happened and to determine appropriate action steps in regard to collecting statements, verifying facts surrounding the student discipline and other violations that took place, including law violations. The homecoming football game that was scheduled for that evening was moved to Saturday and played at Powhatan Field on the ODU campus. From Friday afternoon through Monday, news media outlets and social media took over. Ultimately, a lot of inaccurate information was shared. Some of this inaccurate information inflamed the safety concerns for students, parents, and staff going into the following week. On Monday of the following week, additional staff were made available at the school, including Tommy Schmiegel, who I guess is left, and others to take student and parent statements to aid in the investigation and help answer parent phone calls. On Monday morning, another fire alarm was pulled. No issues. Students went out, came back in, and handled it very well. Unfortunately, that afternoon, another student made a poor decision and tried to set a paper towel on fire and put it in a small trash can and kicked it out into the hallway. Unfortunately for him, it was in a hallway where a fire marshal and a teacher were standing. The fire was put out immediately. There was no alarm that was sounded. The student was identified quickly and charged. On Thursday of that week, so Tuesday and Wednesday were fine. On Thursday of that week, it was actually another fine day. However, another student made the poor decision to bypass the metal detectors and would not follow security personnel directions and became combative. He ended up being pepper sprayed and arrested for disorderly conduct and assault. He had no weapons or anything that would have set off the detector. It was just another poor decision. All during that week, parent-linked phone call messages were sent through the week to keep parents abreast of the facts. The Norview website also posted factual information for parents and the public. A joint statement from NPS, the city, the police department, and the fire rescue department was sent on October 28th to media outlets to provide factual information as well. While the events of the last week are unfortunate, the events demonstrated the unwavering support and partnerships that exist between the Norfolk Public Schools, the Norfolk Police Department, the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Department, and the City of Norfolk. All work together to ensure the safety and security of all students and staff, and we are very appreciative of everyone's support. Action steps being investigated or taking place include adding additional cameras to the parking lot area and a few blind spots identified within the building, ordering and installing fire pull station covers and reconfiguring the pull stations within the school central alarm board with fire department recommendation and support. Reviewing the school crisis plan to address supervision and coverage when students are outside due to events taking place during a lunch period or other times when large groups are assembled. Replacing milk containers from the hard cartons to milk pouches. Continued review with students, the serious consequences for disrupting the school environment, and in particular, the serious nature of pulling a false fire alarm and following the student code of conduct. In conclusion, the events that have taken place were caused by a mix of students who made very poor decisions initiated by the false fire alarms, which created an environment to allow for verbal exchanges after milk containers were thrown to physical altercations. It is important to note, however, that the vast majority of the Norview students made good decisions and should be recognized for the mature way they handled themselves. The faculty and staff did everything they could to help students make correct decisions, providing a safe environment for those students who cooperated and should be applauded for their effort as well. At this time, I would be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, Warren?
Not a question, but a request. First, I applaud all the educators, custodians, security guards, librarians, everyone who participated in such a caring and competent way to deal with these series of incidences. You heard earlier, I applauded Dr. Land's and PBIS initiatives for proactive methods to deal with behavior. The reactive methods, the two numbers, one, the bullying hotline, and two, the crime line number. I ask you to consider under your additional steps how we make sure that all students are aware of both those lines, because what I believe is the vast majority, almost entire student bodies of the city of Norfolk want to learn and are engaged in learning. I would like all of them, 30+ thousand of them, to be part of the student-supported safety net and to take the actions necessary for themselves to put a stop to people who keep learning from them. So again, I emphasize the importance. Dr. King had made wise decisions on the start of school football games and many other things. But please offer them the tools as well as possible, not in a threatening manner, but they want to learn. Let's let those 30+ thousand students help all of us learn. And the two numbers, the bullying number that's been added by this school system, I think that's a wonderful idea, proactive. The crime line number stands there. It's ready when there are crimes committed. I want to turn loose the 30+ thousand students who want to learn and want to be part of a safe school. But thanks to you and all the folks who continue to do such a fine job for school safety. Let's try and turn the 30+ thousand students loose on helping us. Okay. And thanks for that.
Do we have cultural issues that need to be addressed?
I believe we have cultural issues that need to be addressed all of the time in all of our schools. Would I say that it's any greater at this school than any other? Not at this time.
Okay. So any suggestions, any rumors, anything to that effect, you don't see it as a specific issue that's going on with groups of students at Norview? These are just children that unfortunately, as you said earlier, made poor decisions.
In this particular case and over the events over these 2 weeks, yes.
Very quickly, do the fire alarm boxes, do they have video monitors on them?
They do, and I can share that all of the fire alarms that were pulled, the students have been identified and have been charged, except for the last one, which is still being investigated.
From the parent and adult perspective, is there anything that's ongoing addressing them?
In regard to parents, we've reached out to every parent that has contacted us, so a lot of phone calls have taken place, a lot of conferences have taken place as well. I know that the events will be addressed in the school newsletter that will go out in its next edition as well in terms of next steps or precautionary, safety kinds of items. At this time, those are the things that have been identified.
That was my question, is how are we continuing our ongoing communication with parents to let them know that this is a safe climate for their child?
Right now,
Should they have any concerns?
Right. Well, primarily that's through the school website and with the reverse phone calls that Dr. Staley has been making. There have been multiple.
And will those be ongoing for several weeks to months so that as things level out, we will still be communicating with parents so that there's still assurances to this effect? Because climate and safety are just core to these parents for these children.
Dr. Staley assesses, on a daily basis, so, would I say that it will be daily or weekly? It would be hard for me to say. But yes, in terms of keeping parents informed, yes, we want to do that. The other side is we do need to be careful that we don't oversaturate and that the message, gets lost, because it's repeated so many times. However, when we have factual information or when events are taking place that would, where we can be proactive in terms of cautioning parents in terms of safety or conferencing with those students, yes, we can do those things.
Brett?
I think the community at large needs to be reassured too, not just the parents of Norfolk School, Norview High School. And I want to compliment the communications department on putting out the email newsletters that you just started doing. And I would urge all of us to forward them to our respective civic leagues, church league, anybody that can post those to as large a people, get this out to as many people as possible, as well as consider using the TV station to do an interview with Dr. Staley to review what happened and review the steps that we're taking and reassure the parents of students of Norfolk Public Schools that Norfolk Public Schools is a safe and caring environment.
Thank you for that update, and I too would like to commend the district for the response and the way you all not only brought the situation under control and intervened, but also continued on, and Dr. Staley's a superb leadership there and working along in partnership with Norfolk Police Department and others to really ensure the safety there. So you all ought to be commended for that. We know that we have challenges all across America in our public school system with different kinds of violence, and we have to be ready and prepared for a lot of situations, and I'm confident that we're moving in the right direction with regards to that, both prevention and intervention. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Dr. King, Dr. Houston, Ms. Dahl, board members. We will be brief this evening, but we thought it would be imperative to provide you an overview of the support provided by the Office of School Turnaround and Improvement, given to our identified priority focus, conditionally accredited and denied schools. You've received our PowerPoint in advance, and you have a chart now that the conditional, everything is official now in terms of federal sanctions and state accreditation status of each school that we provide support to. We wanted to note that all support is aligned to the U.S. Department of Education's turnaround principles, 7 turnaround principles. They're IndyStar strands, which I know you view when you get a chance, and their key indicators. And so we've had discussion about the 7 turnaround principles. And when you look into IndyStar, especially for our priority schools, we've given you some themes in terms of the strands where you can find tasks aligned to those turnaround principles. Ultimately, our support that we provide is aligned to support the school improvement plans, their academic reviews, essential actions, and tasks. As we continue to update you each month, we're going to update you each month in regards to the status of our schools. We want to continuously align our reports to those 7 turnaround principles because those are the principles that have been found to be effective to turn schools around in a rapid fashion. The first principle we're going to focus on tonight is strong leadership. And you can find alignment for strong leadership in IndyStar under leading change, strand G in the school's IndyStar plans, and of course in strand K, reforming instruction. I have both Dr. Stapleton and Mrs. Campson here to give real-time commentary on the support that they're giving to the schools in regards to those strands.
Well, for TP1, good evening, everyone. For TP1, where we're looking at developing strong leadership, the way teaching and learning is providing such extensive support to our teachers in Norfolk Public Schools to develop and improve their instructional skills to increase student achievement, the OSSI staff is working with the principals and the leadership teams in the schools in our cluster to help them develop their leadership skills around the turnaround principles. And as part of that, we're providing training in the cycle for results and data-driven decision-making. We are sitting in school leadership team meetings. We are very active in a lot of the decision-making when we did a lot of work with all of our schools in scheduling, developing master schedules that would allow the schools to capture more instructional time, particularly in reading and math. And we do that in alignment with the State Department, which is providing us technical assistance. And we attend all of the meetings with our principals there so that we are having a continuous ongoing support about how they can take that technical assistance along with the coaching and guidance that we give them to increase their own leadership skills so that they become strong leaders that can create a climate in their school that removes obstacles to improving student achievement.
We'll move to TP2. Under TP2, the essence of that turnaround principle is ensuring that teachers are effective and able to improve instruction. And that principle is aligned to strand I on providing rigorous staff development, and strand K, again, reforming instruction. As we move on, I'm going to allow Dr. Stapleton to speak to that. But in the earlier presentation where we had teaching and learning here, you heard a lot about the PD that's provided there. And Dr. Stapleton will speak specifically to how we're working with our principals to build their teachers' capacity to become, to be effective teachers in our turnaround schools.
Good evening. Rory Stapleton. We've worked with the training that we've received technical assistance through ARP that was mentioned earlier. We worked with the principals to help them as they were sharing with their staff on the standards, professional knowledge, and instructional delivery. And of course, as you can see there, we will be returning in November for additional technical assistance. So after we receive that type training, we work with the principals as far as how they're going to roll that out to their staff members to make sure that what is going on in the school buildings remains strong with the elements. We've provided professional development sessions on results now as we're trying to move with rapid improvement. We've done some training with effective teacher observation and evaluation. And we've also provided professional development on aligning the goals and their professional development sessions that they offer to their teachers.
We've had much discussion about turnaround principle 3, redesigning the school day, week, or year in an effort to increase student learning and teacher collaboration. That turnaround principle has a direct link to strand J in the STAR, where we speak of increasing learning time. And so we have some bullet points there about how we're doing that. Ladies, want to elaborate a little bit more about what we're doing in the schools to meet turnaround principle 3?
Sure. At a few of the schools we're working on, we've worked with them on some morning sessions that we're calling breakfast clubs to provide additional support for children, especially in mathematics and in reading, but all children are encouraged to attend. Of course, we also have afternoon sessions that we have there. One school in particular has kind of like a twilight session for students. They also feed the students because we know that at that point in time, of course, it's later and they get a little bit hungry, and we want them to concentrate on the needs. Working with another school on a type of like a flex schedule that could possibly occur during the day. And as Lauren mentioned earlier, we worked on tweaking master schedule to make the use of instructional time during the day.
And we also provide a lot of support as the safety net and SOL money started rolling out, how they could best use those funds to increase the intervention part of the cycle for results. And that was aligned with the work we did with the master scheduling, how to organize the school instructional day in a way that captures time that's often wasted so that you manage activities following in a sequence that eliminates the back and forth loss of instructional time as you're transitioning from one place to another. And therefore we could capture an extra 30 minutes here where you could then move in a part-time interventionist that you were funding with your safety net money. And so it was how to make sure that every penny, because you don't get but so much, that every single penny of the money is spent more on boots on the ground, teachers actually working directly in direct instruction with children rather than buying more things. It's always nice to have new shiny things, but having been in a school for a lot of years that did not have new shiny things, I learned how to make the best use of what I had, and that was basically to pour my money into direct support, because nothing impacts a child's achievement more than a teacher, a skilled teacher, giving him direct instruction. And so that's what we worked with as we looked at, both Roy and I, as we looked with our particular schools on how best to use those extra wonderful falling from the sky safety net funds that we get, as well as the SOL funds that come from the state.
When you say the SOL funds, do you mean the SIG monies?
No, the SOL remediation funds that comes from students who may not be successful on the standards of learning, combined with the safety net funds. Executive directors have a formula for issuing those funds to the various schools throughout our division, and then the OSTE staff, we work with our schools specifically, and then other executive directors work with their schools to ensure that those plans are created and to support the safety net implementation.
So the Twilight Hour example and the Breakfast Club example, are those programs being sustained through funds with the safety net monies, or are they through funds that could potentially disappear, such as the SIG money?
Those funds are what they're speaking of are specifically coming from safety net funds.
Okay.
And so that's what we're using right now. Our SIG monies are used primarily for lead turnaround partners, OSTE staff, the turnaround office to support those schools. And so we're using safety net monies. Some schools are using their community partners to definitely support the implementation of those safety nets. And safety nets, and we also call them interventions. Part of what we're doing each month through our SGT process is also monitoring the implementation of those interventions. First part was basically getting the money, developing a plan, identifying what we would use to monitor that plan, and we talk about it each month.
And if you see something like, for example, this particular school that you're doing the twilight hour extra session, if you see that by the time they do their pre-assessment and then their first round of benchmarks, if you see dramatic improvement, do you feel like you have the ability to replicate that at another school?
It's entirely possible.
Okay.
Right now, they were focusing on those seniors who we really, really need to graduate. Either they've not done well in a course, and so they need that to graduate. But certainly, yes.
One thing that I would add to that is we're continuing year 2 of our implementation of professional learning communities. We spoke a lot about that as executive directors last year. And so we have our professional learning communities. We have one specifically for those schools that are in school in our zone. And we're focusing on these same principles. And so they're able to share amongst each other those best practices that they're doing in their schools. And that's been very helpful. The feedback that we've received from the school improvement PLCs has been very positive. The schools, because we have schools at different levels. We have elementary, middle, and at high school, priority focus, some denied, some accredited with warning year 2 or year 3. And so they're able to share their successes as well as things that they would have done differently through that process. So it's been very beneficial for them to come together, share what's working, and then in some cases they're adopting practices that were successful at other schools. As we move on, we look at T4. T4 gets specifically into our instructional program based on student needs and ensuring that the instructional program is research-based, rigorous, and aligned with SOLs. And so, ladies, you'll talk a little bit about that principle.
Okay, well, one of the things that we're working with principals on is making sure that when they look at the lesson plans, we talked a lot about Tier 1 instruction. We don't want to wait to have to worry about Tiers 2 and 3 if we do it right the first time. So we encourage and we ask principals to monitor very closely, and we work with them on monitoring those lesson plans as far as what is it that the teachers are designing to put in front of those children on a daily basis. We want it to be rigorous, and we want it to be aligned with the standards, and we want them really to focus on those verbs and what it is that they're asking, what it is the standards asking the children to do. For example, justify or analyze or create, things like that, that we know would get our students to where they need to be. As far as the common formative assessments, daily, weekly, some of the schools we're working on, they meet with their leadership team. We've encouraged them on a weekly basis. We cannot wait for a 1 month type thing. We have to meet weekly. We have to take a look at that data weekly so that when we get to the, when we take a look at what's going on, we could make quick, rapid changes because we have a lot of, improvement to make. So we have to get going.
And one of the things that we're really working on is because reading is a very low area for us across the district, and all of our schools are warned in reading in our cluster. So we really put a lot of time and effort, and this would, along with the master scheduling, is making sure that we were providing adequate time for small group instruction in reading. Every single day, every child gets 30 minutes of direct instruction in a small group with the teacher, and the instruction is differentiated by reading group based on student assessment data, so that we are identifying the students early who have reading, not necessarily disability, but a reading gap. And at the same time, the students, because part of the cycle for results is the enrichment piece, the students who are reading well can be doing things that continually build their skills too. We don't want to lose those children or not have them make rapid progress even higher than they are. But when we, and this is what Roy was talking about, the lesson plans. The lesson plan review to make sure that they are indeed planning a differentiated lesson for each of the three groups that they have in their classroom, so that they're not just repeating the same instruction 3 different times when they could have just done that with a whole group. So that they're actually doing something different with each group based on their diagnosed needs that come from the student assessment data.
Now, I'll just add to that piece in terms of the instructional program, a critical piece, and the question that you asked earlier deals with frequent monitoring. And that monitoring is not only at the division level, but schools monitoring through their Form Bs, as well as teachers monitoring instruction daily. So frequent monitoring through the formative assessment piece daily and then weekly. So again, that we're not caught waiting for a monthly division level assessment, but we're able to monitor instruction from the school level. And that's where that collaborative planning piece comes into place, making sure that the schools have collaborative planning taking place so that the teachers can come together and discuss data and make adjustments before anybody from the division has to come in. And so that's TP4. Looking at 5, we've talked about this a little today, using data. That goes back into the TAOs, TAO 1s, 2s, and 3s. We heard that with the presentation from Student Support Services in terms of PBIS, and that is directly aligned with the work that we do, or that we all are doing, in terms of the academic piece as well. Want to talk a little bit more about that?
Naturally, he gives me this one because everyone knows how much I love student assessment data. And this is a really big focus for the OSCE staff with our in our school improvement cluster. What we're doing with it, as we know, the TAO 1, 02, and 03 align perfectly with the Norfolk Public Schools cycle for results. It's the data-driven decision-making part of that cycle, which is a response to intervention model. So basically what we do, it starts with what we'd already mentioned, allowing the collaborative planning time, and all the master schedules are created so that all grade levels have a time. And this is a service that, something that most districts don't do, that Norfolk does very well. Our resource times, art, music, PE, we group them together for a grade level. So if you're in 4th grade, all of your students are going to one of those resource areas at the same time, which then allows and creates time for that grade level team to get together, review their data, and do collaborative planning. No one can sit in their room by themselves and think of all the best ideas. But the strongest teachers are the ones that are on teams that plan together and share all those best ideas. So then you've got a whole bag full of best ideas, and you're not making yourself crazy trying to think of new and interesting and creative ways to teach a generation of kids that don't have a long attention span if they don't have a screen that they can manipulate in front of them. So that's the first step. And then the second step in all of our schools, in addition to the pre-assessment that the district does, all of our schools did a universal screening, which we use STAR Reading and STAR Math and SRI, I think, in the upper grades. You can see my elementary knowledge is much greater than my secondary. And so we, the first week of school was our goal. We had some problems with synergy. So a few of our schools were a little bit behind, but basically by the end of the first 2 weeks, pretty much all of our schools could tell you exactly where all of their students were in reading and math as far as looking at a grade level equivalency. And that's one way to look at it. You can look at all kinds of scores, but our parents understand grade level equivalency. So although we can look at Lexiles, which are great, and we can look at whatever it's called when you stack it up, when you take all the data and you put it in a row. I'm having a mind blank here, naturally. But anyway, there are all kinds of ways that give you a finer way of looking at it, but we also need to look at it the way parents do. And parents don't understand Lexiles and they don't understand that, but they understand my child is a third grader and he's reading on a second grade level, or he's reading on a first grade level, or my child's a third grader and man, he's reading on a fifth grade level. They understand that. And so that improves the way we communicate with our parents. So we have that information and we use that to create the initial tiers that our students went into. Our tiers are fluid. You don't get put in a tier and stay there for life. You know, our goal, then that's why we do monthly assessments. And the district now, this year, started creating their own CFAs so that we get to see across the whole school district what we have. So that's the next part. So we did our screenings and then we put in our tiered interventions, which is part of the cycle for results, as we all know. And so that's why and to make this happen in our schools, the first thing that the OSTE staff did was we brought in all of the principals in the school improvement cluster at the very, I think back in August, and we gave them intense training in the cycle for results, which is which is a response intervention model, along with data-driven decision-making, which is a big slice of that cycle for results, so that they had that knowledge. And then we went into most of the schools and either trained the leadership team, and in some cases, the entire staff. You know, you can't always get everyone in August, but as many as we could so that we started off with a baseline of knowledge. You know, and all of our principals are like all of us. They have different levels of proficiency where we are. And so what we were working to do was to level the playing field so that all of our principals in our turnaround cluster had a good knowledge of the cycle. And then that's what one of our big jobs has been, is to coach the principals and the leadership teams and how to take all this assessment data and use it to do that tiering and interventions. And then with the master schedule again, find the time to make it happen.
I would just add, one of our, the VDOE has helped us by helping us find an additional partner, UPD, who's working with Lake Taylor and Compostela in terms of this data-driven decision-making. And I'm going to let Dr. Stapleton talk a little bit more about that because she's the facilitator for that.
I was just going to share that we do have a performance management group called UPD, as Dr. Wilford has said, working with us with Lake Taylor and Compostela. It's new, and they're going to look at the goals that we have set for the school, and they're going to assist us in making those marks, reaching our marks. So we've had several conversations, and we met with both groups on October the 14th. We're going to meet again on November the 18th and November the 19th. And what they've really done so far is kind of like a pre-training of the various roles that we have to take, such as, for example, some people are going to be in the gallery, somebody's a facilitator, some people they're considered statees, et cetera, their terminology. The various roles that we have to take as we study our data. So it's brand new, and we're really excited to get the support.
The idea behind that may be something that we're piloting in 2 schools this year, but we may be able to expand that to the other schools in the cluster as an additional model to support this principle in terms of using data. As we get to 6, and we've talked about this evening, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on establishing a school environment that improves school safety and discipline, but it's monumental and important to us as well because it points directly to climate and the monitoring of the implementation of PBIS. And one of the things that we've done specifically for the schools that we serve is added a member from the Department of Student Support Services to our SGTs as a key division team member to see the implementation of PBIS through the cluster. Ms. Smith provided a slide earlier to this afternoon and seeing the successes at Tidewater Park, for instance, and we saw successes at Richard Bolin, who saw increased student achievement as well. And so we want to duplicate that in our schools, because our schools specifically do have some, all schools may, but specifically we've seen some impact from the discipline issues, and we know that all of these other things that we're talking about can't be addressed unless we address the school environment. So that was critical for us. We're going to move on in this last one, and not to rush these last two because they're critical. The discipline piece, but turnaround principle 7 gets directly into family and community engagement. And we're at different levels there with our schools. Some schools have lots of support, community partners, civic organizations supporting them. But this is critical for us in getting the parents on board. And so we are having I would call a mission of being very transparent, pulling our parents in to let them know what it means to be in school improvement and to know that we won't be in this status for long. It's very much like Lauren said about those tiered babies. You don't stay in improvement for life, and we want to move our schools out of improvement, and we're going to need the parent support to do that. Anything I want to add?
I would just say that in all of the schools, the principals have done a fine job, the leadership team, I should say, they've done a fine job of being very transparent and sharing with the families about the status, encouraging them to come in. And in one school in particular, I was very pleased to see the way in which they actually asked the families who were present to give them feedback on how they could support their children. And I thought that was a neat way to go about saying, this is where we are, this is how we would like for you to help us, but now I need for you to tell us what you expect of us. So that was Booker T. Washington. We had a parent meeting the other night, and we're actually going to have another one coming up. So there are a lot of very neat things going on as far as reaching out to the parents and saying, we need your support as well. As we work to help and grow your children, we need your support too.
Our next steps for our schools include, in all schools at different places. Again, we have 4 different cohorts of priority schools. We have several denied schools, and we have a conditionally accredited schools. For cohort 5, we are in the process of identifying lead turnaround partners for those schools and working with them on that. We talked earlier tonight about the development of the corrective action plans for those denied and conditionally accredited schools. That's also a next step for us. Of course, our schedules are full of filled with monthly shared governance team and division leadership team meetings. When we're not and rarely are we in our office, but definitely on the grounds, and having these meetings and inspecting what we expect on a continuous basis. If we're not in Norfolk, then we are probably in Richmond, participating in technical assistance from the VDOE for our schools. We are happy that the VDOE is coming to us and partnering with us to deliver the ARP, which is very important for our principals. That's ongoing, but they're going to do that here. And last but certainly not least, coming up, we're at the quarter mark, and so this month our principals will be developing or preparing their leading and lagging reports. And that's going to be across the cluster, the development of the leading and lagging reports. So we'll be able to share that with you next month. So great things are happening. Feel very good about where we are. Very thankful for our school improvement administrators who are doing a fabulous job, and as well as the collaboration that we're having across the division to support these schools, from teaching and learning, curriculum and instruction, content coordinators, and executive directors. It is definitely a team approach. And because of the work and the approach that we're taking, we're expecting definitely rapid improvement in these schools.
Well, thank you. We asked some time ago, I believe it was last year, for regular updates on our schools that are focus and priority, and that's exactly what we're getting. And I want to say thank you for what you're doing and what you've said about what you're doing. Yes, sir.
Dr. Williford knows about this, but you haven't heard it. Maybe not next month, but probably March, April, or May, I'm going to ask you a question and you can voluntarily respond. The question will be, in your opinion, self-evaluation time, what barriers have you removed, what barriers have you helped to remove for principals or teachers, the people? The reason why I'm going to ask that is because much activity is going on, our state colleagues and all around, but I think what I'm interested in is how the people who are delivering this guidance for students, what barriers, in your opinion, that you think you have removed from principals or educational people, counselors and whatever? It's just going to be my way of helping you celebrate what you've done, but you know, your colleagues, I'm going to ask everyone part of this team. It's just because what for me is critical is how they are helped by what you're doing and your perception of how that is. So again, it's voluntary, and if you say you have nothing to say, then I would understand that.
6 months, great answer.
Didn't catch that. What was that?
6 months.
Thanks you all.
No, 3 months, 3 months.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I wrote down 4 questions, and as one of the ones that was advocating for the update, there's one question I'd like for you to answer now if you can, and then 3 others maybe you can share with us next week. But these are the types of things I had in mind with the update. So my one question, like if you could answer now, are we on or ahead of schedule for all district and school level essential actions and tasks?
I would answer that. I'll take that. I would say that we're on schedule. We started the summer with I would say a laser-like focus on those essential actions. That is a part of the work that we're doing at the school level. We did, we completed follow-up reports for those schools back and submitted those to the VDOE on September 30th for each school. Our school improvement administrators also, we're focused on those essential actions and giving comments on to the schools in the IndyStar plans as we're seeking evidence of the completion of those essential actions as well. In our last PLC, what we found is that the work that we're doing the work in terms of working towards I would call it functional ability in regards to the essential actions, and that's using the language of from the rubric. What we're asking of our principals now, one piece that we must have is evidence of completion of the essential actions, and so they're uploading their evidence into a academic review folder on in their IndyStar plans to show that. We will go back and evaluate the evidence that's provided with the idea that they will get to functional, which was a 2 on that rubric. And after that, that's a continuous process, but the essential action may be closed out or another essential action may be added, but that will become the responsibility of the staff to determine that. And in many cases, what we've challenged our principals to do is not only to be functional, but to get to the fully implemented status of those essential actions.
But generally speaking, we're on schedule.
Yes, I would definitely say that we're on schedule.
And then the other 3 applies to anyone, again, as a follow-up at a future time. What are we doing for schools that are at the borderline that we think might be in danger of falling in school improvement to make sure they don't fall there? what are we doing or can we do, if appropriate, to support Tidewater Park with their loss of SIG funding? And what additional supports, if any and appropriate, can we provide Camp Estella as the school remains geographically divided and under the MOU denied status? So those are the questions or thoughts I'd like to get some feedback on at the appropriate time.
You just want to email those perhaps?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. Then you can prepare even a written response.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll send it to every,
Yes.
the Camp Estella's do a split.
Right. I just didn't hear the end of your question.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Oh, because they're-
Excellent information.
Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 hours and 15 minutes of agenda items left. I'm not sure if you all wanted to order Little John's. What's the name of the place?
Jimmy John's. It's Jimmy John's. So this is my recommendation moving forward, that we do policy, we do legislative priorities, because that breakfast is going to be on the 19th, and Warren won't be here next week, and that Dr. Thornton gives his presentation, and we do milestones and hopefully quickly. And that if we could just delay the tie and the A+, the CIP we've received in writing, and human resources, if perhaps we can have that delayed. Any
Okay.
objection to that?
Okay, and
Okay.
of course, I have to transition at this point, so I'm turning the meeting over to Ms. Doyle, and we have a plan for the final agenda matters.
Okay, so School Board Policy Committee, Dr. Birdsong. Dr. King, sorry, first. I apologize.
School Board Policy Committee, Mr. Joy.
Without the verse, do you want to go? I guess I'll,
Mr. Cloud.
Jeez, everybody start touching their nose. Not it.
Good evening, Dr. Houston. I know you're transitioning. Mrs. Doyle, Dr. King. Thank you for giving us this opportunity this evening, and our presentation could possibly be brief depending upon your questions. You had a number of policies to review for this board work session. We provided all of the information to you beforehand so that you could review the information and ask questions as you deem appropriate. Our committee has been very productive, in my opinion. We have certainly accomplished a lot in a very short period of time. We were able to get through all of the updates from, I believe it was, what was the March update, the June update from last year, the policies that weren't covered last year. Then it was brought to our attention that there were several other policies for the past probably couple of years that had not been reviewed or discussed with the board. So those are the policies that you have before you today, with the exception of FFA, which is school names, which we really need to discuss and finalize this evening. And so with that said, unless there are other questions, do you have any questions outside of FFA? Because we do believe we need to present that information to you so we can move forward with perhaps approval at the next school board meeting so that we can be on board with the Lafayette school schedule in terms of naming that school.
Yeah, let me add something to that. So, the advisory committees, what we did was we received some good recommendations from staff. We looked at some best practices, and what we attempted to do was to streamline them so that they are consistent, but inside the policy itself didn't have a significant amount of details that we thought really should fall into the regulations area. So what you'll see is we bubbled up the advisory committees to a BCF level. They tried to speak generally in terms of how the advisory committee policy would work. Then we broke out for gifted, career and technical ed, and school health advisory committee specific policy recommendations. Some of those were driven by the state, like the School Health Advisory Committee. Others are a combination of those things that are driven by the state and those things that came from the staff and the committee. And then you'll notice that the Special Education Advisory Committee policy right now does not have the same level of breakout as some of the others. And part of that is a result of us going back to the SEAC, and we asked them to take a look at it, and they are in the process of reorganizing and updating their bylaws. And so what we did was we shared with them some of the appropriate policies that we thought impacted special education. But at the same time, we're anticipating coming back at a later date after they've had a chance to reorg and update their bylaws, and then have the policy reflect that. I think that's it, other than, we did say we wanted to break out the naming policy, which we talked about earlier, and then are we still going to get the separate update on one of the special education?
Yes, we tabled that.
Okay.
We had a discussion with Mr. Cloud, and so
Okay.
we need more time
Okay.
for that. And so that will be at the next work session.
Okay, so
That's why we pulled it.
Okay, so generally what you have before you then are all the policies that we vetted, the regulations that we attached from the administration. And so I think from the committee standpoint, outside of maybe going through and describing the school naming piece, that I think what Dr. Birdsong was saying is on point, that if there are specific questions, then we have folks available to do that. Otherwise, we think we're good unless somebody says we aren't.
Okay, I do have a question on the CTE. Do we currently have a CTE advisory committee, or is this new?
No, we currently have a CTE advisory.
I'm sorry, we do?
Yes, ma'am, we do, and they meet quite regularly. They've been very active for many years. They've been working with Kenyatta Goshen, and it's very community-driven, and it's a very robust committee.
Okay. I just asked the question as we look forward to CTE in the years to come, is this something that we're updating, and will it prohibit future, or will it align with future CTE plans?
Many of the folks who are on the CTE Advisory Council are already working in some capacity with the future CTE Comprehensive High School, so it's totally in alignment. It will just expand and flourish as we move forward with the other project.
Okay. That was my one question there. Brad?
My question is on the school naming. Does that, does that change the policy that we voted on and passed last year that limits the name to somebody that has been deceased for 10 years?
We discussed that in our last meeting, and it was the recommendation of not only the Policy Review Committee, but the administration as well, as the policy continued to be implemented as written. So we did not advocate for any changes or advise of any changes.
Other than the school naming policy, are there any of these policies that are not initiated by a General Assembly, therefore a VSBA recommendation?
All of them, to my knowledge, were VSBA recommendations,
Thank you.
with the exception of the naming policy, as you stated.
I just wanted to hear a little bit about the administration's discussion as to how they came about in support of the current policy for the school naming decision or policy that we're looking at right now.
Okay. I'm going to ask Dr. Williford and Dr. Charbonnet to come to the table. What we did when we discussed it in our committee, we decided that it was, we wanted a recommendation from the administration. So Dr. Savigny and our executive directors of school were asked to review it, to provide some recommendations to the cabinet. They did so, and we mutually agreed that we would accept the policy as written and that we wouldn't suggest any changes at this time.
Yeah, and I'll just add, and Reverend Haywood can chime in too, we, not only did we receive that recommendation from the administration that we agreed with, but we went back and looked again at some of the policies, around the state, and it just seemed like there were so many pitfalls associated with naming after a living individual or someone who has recently passed. We just thought that it was a good practice to leave it in place.
That's what I needed to hear. There were many other examples of when you did not adhere to that policy of conflict that arose from that, I guess is what you're saying.
There were some school districts that had policies that wouldn't even name after individuals at all. And so we thought that, kind of leaving it in place where we have that option, but again, trying to avoid any pitfalls like we've talked about previously, that leaving it in place was a good thing, and then having the open process where, Mrs. Doyle had made recommendations in terms of, on the regulation side, the public hearing, being able to form committees when it's appropriate, getting that recommendation back to the administration submitting it to us as a board. And we did note, and we are saying now, that ultimately, that naming responsibility falls with the board. But we wanted to make sure that there was an open process for the community and for people to be engaged, and for all the expertise that the administration needed to provide to a team that would be doing that work, that we just made sure it was a open and simple process, but one that could be married to, like we were talking about earlier with Lafayette Winona, that if you wanted to get into some specifics, that would be something that the administration could do without having their hands tied by something we put into the policy.
Okay, good. So at this point, are we good with all else except for then, let's talking about the FFAR? Okay, sorry?
What's your exception?
No. I think I said, are we good with all else?
The naming.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
With all else other than the naming, because that's the one thing that you, Dr. Birdsong, want to go through, right?
Yes,
So is
please.
everybody good with all the other policies as?
Oh, we're going to go through the naming policy?
Yes.
Okay.
We would like to, since it's new. And what we did, the administration was tasked with putting together, developing regulations around this existing policy. And so again, we went back to the executive directors and Dr. Savigny to take a look at that and then come back to cabinet with a recommendation. We did use, Mrs. Doyle, some of your recommendations that you provided to us. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Charbonnet and Dr. Williford just to kind of go through the steps, and if you want to just briefly review the regulations, and if there are questions, we'll make sure they're answered.
Well, we looked at several policies and regulations, across divisions, across the state and the nation. And through those, through discussion, these are the steps that we came to agreement with. And we put some timelines around it, but not specific dates, so that it could apply to any situation. And so it reads at least 6 months prior to a new school facility scheduled opening, the superintendent and/or his designee, it may be an executive director or a principal, shall assign an administrator to chair a school naming committee. The superintendent and/or his designee shall notify the board that a school naming committee has been formed or is being formed, and then it gets into the committee defining the committee as a diverse group of stakeholders representing different ethnic and geographical composition of the school division, so a diverse group. After that group is formed, 2 weeks after that, the committee will solicit input from local citizens and community entities, such as neighborhood civic associations, parent organizations, and other community agencies and organizations. That could be by letter, website, using all of what we know in terms of soliciting input from the community. After receiving input from the community, the school board will host a public hearing to receive additional input from the community. And then after the receipt of that input, the committee will recommend in priority order its preference from among the listing of names. 1 week after, the committee chair will notify the superintendent of the committee's recommendation, and then the superintendent will forward that committee's recommendation to the board. And ultimately, the board will announce and name the facility in public. And so we did not get into whether it was at a board meeting or how, but following this timeline, we can have a new facility named.
Any thoughts or questions on one new and repurposed facilities?
I just wanted to clarify that when we had the public hearing, and part of the drive around is that we knew we had the committee that was doing the work, and we knew they were going to do great outreach, but we also know that people are very busy. And so at the public hearing, it would give anyone in the public another shot if it's something they wanted to put out there for the board to consider.
I think that's a great idea. It's a good opportunity. Any other thoughts on one before we go to two, renaming? Okay, two, renaming.
Okay. This was added because there has been, from what we've gathered, some questions of renaming schools in some instances. And so we looked into renaming a school, and basically it reads here, for the superintendent or his designee to lead a committee that affirms community support by soliciting input. So if there's a movement for renaming a school, then the superintendent or his designee would verify that, and then through soliciting input from the community, civic organizations, and the others, and then the superintendent will evaluate the information that's been gathered and consider if support exists for that. And after that, we will hold a public hearing on the superintendent's recommendation prior to board's approval for renaming a school.
Any thoughts or questions? Okay, so hearing none, it appears that next week we could move forward on consent with the FFAR regulation of school names, number 1 and 2, as outlined today. Does anybody disagree with that? No. Okay, well, thank you to the policy committee. Great work. I know you did a lot between now and last meeting. Yes, Brad?
I would suggest that the administration go ahead and start whatever planning they have to do instead of waiting until next week. Go ahead and start it, because I anticipate it's going to pass unanimously. It'll be through the consent agenda, so
Yes.
go ahead and get working on it.
I concur. Good idea. Okay, so thanks again to the policy committee. Thank you all very much. This seems to be a great process. So moving forward, that's wonderful. Mr. Cloud, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Next time, keep your presentation first.
Yeah, next time, stop talking so much. Yes.
Just again, I would like to just point out that, Dr. Birdsong, Janelle, Attorney Cloud, and then a whole host of other folks did a lot of work on these policies and regulations in a very, very short time. So we do appreciate the amount of effort that they put forward to get us to this point.
Thank you. And I believe, are we now current, by the way? With
And
all
we
of
are current. And we do have another group that I just received from the SBA. Recently, I participated in a telephone conference with them this past Friday, so you'll be seeing more policies.
Yes, Frank?
Just to piggyback with what Mr. Jordan said, that this process has improved our ability to deal with these policies. Because I remember 3 years ago, we're trying to wordsmith these policies in the meeting, and we'd spend so much time that we couldn't get the important information that we needed. So I applaud you and Ed on your efforts, and Dr. Birdsong and everybody else that's included, and let's keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm very sorry for Dennis Fuddy, Ronnie, I'm so sorry, but we are going to delay 3.06, and we will defer that probably till our next meeting, probably not the 12th, but the one in December. But we will confirm that with the team and get back to you. So I appreciate your preparation for today, and I'm sorry that you're not able to present, although we have seen some of the information, so thank you. Okay, operations, 3.07 CIP, we do have that information. It was given to us late here on our seats today, updated. So I figured we could just take a look at that. If anybody has any questions, they can email Dr. King, Rex Gay, who is here, and Dr. Simmons, who is not here today due to illness. Okay, legislative priorities and annual breakfast. I know that our breakfast is November 18th at Town Point Club, right? Warren, was there anything that you wanted to share in preparation for that, or was there anybody,
Yes.
Dr. King, did you have anything? Okay.
One very important item. What I think may come in a recommendation by Superintendent King by January is ways to increase learning time, which is critical according to everyone. Turnaround principals, everyone. If we wait till then, we miss the opportune moment on our breakfast day to ask our elected officials to spearhead an initiative, to ask the General Assembly to allow us to begin school before Labor Day. I think we ought to add it. The initiatives we have, there's no further initiatives from VSBA. I've placed a phone call. I have not received a call back, but no additional items than the ones that we already have. These exist in this sheet is passed around because in the event you haven't made your individual visit, and you wish to do so, I don't mean mailing it to someone, I mean sitting down with them and talking with them to continue your relationship. So these are the items that we have now to give to them. Coming around to you, I would suggest that we consider strongly adding a request to have our legislative team spearhead special approval for us to begin school before Labor Day. Now, a minor thing is, Ms. Banks and Dr. King, I don't know if Ms. Simmons, I don't believe the president and legislative chair of PTA has been invited. I just briefly interacted with them the other night when we were at the event, and it would be important to invite the president and legislative chair because they've been invited to the past.
Ms. Bailey has been invited. He's referring to the legislative chair.
Scott. Peggy.
Oh, Peggy's still
Yeah, well, it was announced the other night. I didn't know that, but, so both of them need to be invited because, they're a big part of what we do. But
All right, so you're asking the board if they would support adding a legislative priority that would advocate a special for Norfolk that we could start school before Labor Day.
actually, it be our major initiative when we have this conversation. These items they've seen before. They've seen it because of us. They've seen it in previous years. They continue to be violated by the state of Virginia. But I think what would make this gathering different could be,
A discussion around that point.
well, actually a request.
Well, I'm saying it would generate clearly a discussion.
Right, because they can best tell us how they would advance that.
Right.
And again, if we don't do that now, we can't suggest that if
It's
Dr.
too
King
late.
makes this recommendation. I'm not asking Dr. King if that's going to be one of his recommendations, but my guess is that it's being highly considered, and I don't think we can wait till January to mention it on the 18th at breakfast.
Okay, yes, Dr. King?
We have a group, a committee, administrative committee discussing this now. A lot of work was done in the past in terms of options and that kind and such. And it's related to extended time, the calendar, start time. And so we should have a recommendation around that soon. And what I'd like to do is circle back to the committee to see where we are with, of course, we can enter into discussion and give research and background, but I want to ensure that we're ready to make a recommendation possibly on this particular day.
Could that be done by the next meeting next week so that this board can take action and have it ready to address on the 18th?
Okay, I'm making a note on that now.
The reason why I suspicioned you might is because when we began our Conversion Schools initiative, it was centered on the reason of starting schools before Labor Day. That was one of the main premises of that initiative which you proposed. And the judge in the OEI case asked a clear question. Is the only thing that the state of Virginia think it can do to help these schools that are struggling is to take them over. And clearly, the answer wasn't good because the judge ruled unconstitutional. One of the things the state of Virginia's leadership can do is to grant Norfolk and any other school system with struggling schools the option to increase the student learning time by starting before Labor Day. It is not novel. It is done across the state of Virginia for reasons of weather and whatever. So we would not be breaking ground, but I think it should be the priority for our meeting on the 18th.
Okay, so how about for the agenda for next week? We can just add legislative priorities back to it again.
I won't be there, but you've already heard.
Right, in consideration with a recommendation, and perhaps even beforehand, Dr. King, we can come up with language that we could then just add and have it be on the ready. Dr. Savigny?
Dr. Stewart, one question.
Yes.
When we talk about the extended school year in the context of beginning prior to Labor Day, that makes some of us very excited. In your vision, do you have a time frame? Are you looking at potentially us researching starting 5 days and adding 5 days or 10 days or 15 days?
I would choose to defer to y'all's judgment as a body on what to do on that. But again, I tell you, this is not novel in Virginia. There are school systems that are in the far west and different locations that have different reasons for doing this. What better reason could there be than the state removing barriers so that a locality can provide more learning time for their students to learn?
Thank you.
Thanks for
Question?
asking.
Well, I was going to follow up to that one in the task force report, our Schools in Challenging Environments Task Force report, I don't know if you've seen that, but if not, I'll send it to you, because we have some recommendations in there, not only in terms of starting before Labor Day, but having the state to provide support for more days.
Right.
So 210 days supporting teacher contracts and all of that. So I would ask for you all to look at that as well when you're doing your research. And then the other piece is I read where and I guess Dr. King, you were there, where the council had a meeting in terms of legislative priorities, and in their educational recommendations, it seemed to be focused on, did it have time also? Okay, because I just saw the 2 schools and
CTE and the governor.
and don't cut funding.
Right.
But I do think it's important that their priorities align with ours and our priorities align with theirs, so that we can get the full support of what's coming from the city of Norfolk as one set of priorities for advancing our district and not seemingly disconnected priorities.
Yeah, that's a good point. What we could do is just certainly share with them these, of course, and the one that we potentially add next week as well as, so good point. Yes, Noel?
Do you think it would be a good idea to provide our legislators a copy of the report that they did?
Sure.
Yeah, they all received it. They all received a copy, but we can make sure.
At least the executive, so.
Yeah, well, I know they got the full,
Okay.
So,
the full report.
Mr. Jordan, if I could ask you to do this too. That report's fabulous. It's on the, front page of the website of VSBA, but could you send that link out to everybody?
Yes.
Including administration and others, so that people have the ability to read it. It's a great document, and it's easy to read. I mean, it's well laid out. So.
I do have a question from Ms. Banks. Have you received any RSVPs? I've had verbal RSVPs from Senator Lewis and Delegate Plotz that they intend to be there. Have you received?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks.
Okay, anything else on legislative priorities?
Not from me.
Okay, so Warren, I know you're not here next week. We'll take up the mantle. Dr. King and I will work
Thank
on
you
that.
very much.
Sure. Okay, so, community engagement, if we don't mind. Dr. Savigny, if we could move that. I know that Carlos wasn't going to be here tonight. You were going to be the delivery. Very good. Okay, Dr. Thornton, you are on. Dr. King first.
Dr. Thornton.
Doyle, Dr. King, school board members, good evening.
Good evening.
Agenda item 3.09 is just a recap of some recommended budget priorities and/or areas of focus for the FY16 budget planning process as we prepare for next week's pre-budget public hearing to be held here in the school board office. So I'll just pass around, you have in your packet the one-page document that recaps those areas of focus. We also provided for you the alignment of those areas of focus to the school board's priorities for this year, as well as the alignment to the school board's applicable strategic plan strategies. So I'll be happy to answer any additional questions. Otherwise, the document is essentially, or the contents of the document are essentially what you have seen at previous meetings and discussed. It's just in a different format aligned to your priorities and your strategic plan strategies.
Any questions for Dr. Thornton or Dr. King? Warren, yes.
Not related to this document, but it's related to something else. So if you have,
let's
have anyone has a question related to this,
Yeah, let's have
I'll hold.
questions for this first.
Right.
Any questions? Are people pondering?
Yes. The one-page document, not the document that I'm passing around, that
Right.
I just passed around, but
Right,
the one-page areas of focus. The other document I'll pass around in
Okay, so which document are you referring to?
3.09 is the item that's on the agenda.
Right.
That recaps the areas of focus for budget planning for 15-16. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those, but I've also passed around a two-page document that I will share with the board. It's not on the agenda, but it's my understanding from the chair and Ms. Doyle as well, that you wanted an update on the action that the city council took last week regarding the additional appropriation.
Yeah, that's
So that's what I'm sharing with you
Okay.
in addition.
That's
So
what
let's-
my question
Right, so let's go back. The initial document we've seen before, that's just a
Correct.
preparation for next week. No changes to that document.
That is correct.
Okay, so just as a reminder, we do have the budget hearing next week. It's here, along with the recognition ceremony and all. Okay, so if you could then, Dr. Thornton, you can speak to the recommended adjustments.
Okay. So as the board knows, throughout the month of September and even spilling over into October, I shared with the board, and the board agreed on a set of recommended uses of additional federal and state funding. That original amount totaled $882,500. And that was to be used to address some specific areas as it relates to open campus, Magic Johnson Bridgegate program fees, and we shared that information with the board at previous meetings. Since that time, the council not only approved the appropriation of that $882,500, but they also approved an additional local appropriation of $750,000. And those funds were to be used for specific purposes, one of which would be $450,000 earmarked for facility repairs at Maury High School, specifically the ceiling in the auditorium at Maury. In addition, that $750,000 is to be used to support any additional needs with the opening of the Open Bridgescape Academy. And as well, some additional funding to provide support for the outfitting and facility improvements at the current Lafayette Winona School as we prepare to repurpose it next year. So what you have before you is a two-page document that summarizes the revenue sources as well as the identified expenditures. And you have detail on the second page itemizing what those expenditures would be or those uses of those funds. If you turn to the second page, you will see that the additional revenue totals $1.6 million. Of that, $382,500 is state funding, which I shared with you previously. Federal is $500,000, which I shared with you previously, and the new additional local funding is the $750,000 that I alluded to that the council took action on last week as well. And then you have the itemized list of the planned uses of those funds. All total, $1,632,500. And the council has already taken appropriation action, so the board would be asked to take its final budget amendment action to increase its budget, its operating budget from $317.6 million to $319.2 million to take into account the additional appropriation provided by City Council. Questions?
Dr. Stewart.
with all due respect to people who aren't with us, I am unclear right now. Are we assuming the figures that the City Council said, you will spend, this is kind of like not a line item veto, it's a line item supplemental appropriation. It's interesting. So are we accepting their decision on how much we should spend it on Maury, how much we should spend it on Lafayette, Winona, and how much we should spend it on open campus? Are we accepting their recommendations? Or are we making our own recommendations on that?
I had the opportunity to bring administration together to have that very discussion.
Thank you.
And so, staff members involved with Lafayette, staff members involved with open campus. And of course, the Maury piece was pretty cut and dry based on what we received from operations. And as a matter of fact, they made modifications to various areas to arrive at these figures broken out as you see them.
You and your colleagues make that judgment?
Yes, they make those, yes, they make the recommendations to me. And
I have an additional question. My source of information is the newspaper, and with the recent electoral results of voting in elected school boards, I think it's going to be very important for us to have a conversation. And again, with due respect, I think it's very important that the school board, not you, Dr. King, this is our job, that we make a very clear communication that a supplemental appropriation clears the way in operating budget for other spending. That's wonderful. And there are other supplemental appropriations that could come in the future to clear the way for annual operating expenses. But it's very important that I understand, that they understand, that their gift to us, which is well accepted and I'm very grateful for, is done so with our judgment on how to spend it and not coming to us in a line item request. I think that's important, and I want to make sure that we as a school board and the city council have an understanding about that. I didn't read it that way. When I read the article, I don't think you had already convened your people to make the decision, and I want to make sure that if it is the school board's decision on the budget, that there isn't some subversion of that, accidental as it may be. I'm very grateful for all the city council has done in years past to make up for the reduction in funding from the state and the reduction in funding from the federal government. Had it not been for this city council, we would be hurting like many localities are. And I'm very grateful for this funds, but I want to make sure there is that understanding. So I look to our board to make sure that we understand each other well. Sorry. With due respect, I offer that suggestion.
Yeah, I understand that communication. I think that's a good message to convey and to understand, knowing that the board oversees the budget.
And
That's
I'm
one of our
very grateful
opportunities.
that Dr. King and you and your colleagues had the opportunity to prioritize the way it was spent, and I really appreciate the city council thinking of us.
Right. Mr. Jordan.
And I don't know if this is appropriate for next week, but I would like to get some clarification around the thought process with the allocation and prioritization. Like I'm not real sure. I guess I should say when we adopted the budget or had several iterations of the budget around open campus, my understanding was that we were pretty good for this year. And now it seems like there's a great deal of support going there, and I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. But I am concerned about it in relationship to all the things we talked about earlier as far as needs that we may have at, tutors at Booker T. I get volunteers that still raise concerns about the background check fees. It just seems like there's a lot of things that maybe we could do on the academic side that the administration thought was appropriate to deal with the students that we're trying to keep on path so they don't end up in the open campus cohort group. So I just would like to get just some understanding what the $400,000 in program fees is about. Are these things tied to the proposed expansion, or are these things tied to the existing operations with the align with the report that we heard earlier.
The $400,000 program fee is aligned with the initial opening of the school. You recall that in September, when we shared with the board recommended uses for the additional state funding and the additional federal Medicaid reimbursement, that $882,500, the $400,000 for Magic Johnson Open Campus program fees was a part of that,
So
the initial startup.
So the $400,000 that is now falling in our laps,
The
freed up.
$750 from the city.
Right, I'm just using this number now, but
Okay.
but whether you use the 400 or 750 that fell in our laps has freed us up to do what?
The $750 additional money that we didn't anticipate when we sent over our recommended needs to the council for the state and federal money, the $750 right now has been identified for, number one, if you look at the 6th item down, instructional support, resource materials for media center at Magic Johnson Bridgegate
Okay, so
Open
35.
Campus, $35,000. This is an amount that was identified, I believe, between Dr. Savigny and Dr. Simmons, and of course, Dr. King and as well sharing it with staff, to have resource materials there. Dr. Savigny, did you want
Yes, to put in a mini media center for the students to access while they're in the facility, and also to provide an instructional resource room for the students and the staff.
So that's in addition to the original budget that we discussed for Open Campus.
Correct, this amount was not included
Okay.
in that original budget.
Okay, and then how about, I'm sorry.
It
if you
appears that
wanna
the
finish.
additional technology equipment is also that the same as those, are those the additional laptops so that students can take those home?
That's new, yes,
Yes.
for Open Campus.
That's
That's
new.
coming out of that $750,000 local support.
And is the 180 coming
180?
out of the additional?
No, the 180, originally it was 150. That was for what we had, when we were going to be at a non-NPS campus.
Right.
That was the 150 for anticipated utilities. But when we made a decision to go to Coronado, that money was shifted for the facility improvements that were needed to open the building on that day. So the additional 30,000 above that is for Open Campus related to the facility improvements for what I understand to be a future nursing, childcare, daycare.
Daycare
Yeah.
facility.
So in total, there's about 85,000 out of the 750 that is allocated by your
Additional.
recommendation for Open Campus in addition to what was already budgeted, in
That's right.
addition to what was also allocated in September of the 400.
That's correct.
Do we have to vote on this?
Yeah,
These
the
new
board
appro-
will need to take action on it.
Next week.
Next week to amend the budget,
Okay.
the total operating budget.
And then I guess one other question I have on this, are these sunk costs or are these going to be operating costs ongoing that we have to carry moving forward?
Generally speaking, the instructional support resource materials, that should be one-time in nature.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we want to add more materials,
Right.
but there won't be an ongoing replacement cost associated with it. The additional technology equipment, it's my understanding that it's for wireless laptops for kids to take home and use 24/7. Obviously, there's some life cycle costs associated with that if we start it, then at some point, we're going to have to replace it. Or if the equipment is damaged for whatever reason, then we have to make the decision to replace it. Do we have the ongoing revenue identified to replace it? No.
Okay. Did anybody else have any questions?
No, but I'm sorry, but I just want to have some reservations, and I'll share those in between now and in the meeting. I'm just like to have a better feel. So, I mean, I appreciate the recommendation, but I'd just like to have a better feel.
Okay.
And will,
Noel, please.
will this be on a consent agenda, or will we be voting on it separately?
It depends on how this discussion goes
Okay.
tonight. So if
Okay.
people can't necessarily concur or there's consensus tonight, then I think it's going to be a vote not on the consent agenda.
Okay. at this point in time, I cannot concur, so I would prefer it to be separate from the consensus agenda.
Brad, yes, Dr. King.
I would like to remind the board that the reason for a work session and for having separate items is to have discussion, so that if there are any needed modifications, then
Right.
between this point and the business meeting, then those could possibly be made based on the input and feedback from it.
Good point.
So it
If
doesn't
you were-
mean that it's written in stone.
Are you asking to hear more now, or you're saying?
Yes.
Both, really.
Okay.
Both, really, because I think, here's my suggestion, to take the input and feedback from the board, be able to go back to the team, discuss that input and feedback with the team, and then to bring back further recommendation or clarification, and which could then morph into the final recommendation and action that the board would take. So I think that would be a good approach.
Brad, did you have a question, comment?
I just want to know what people would prefer to use the money for.
Well, I'm not sure that, I mean, that's why I was trying to couch it as, you know, I'm leaning on what the administration is recommending to us, but I would say that if all of the anticipated safety net resources that we need have been taken care of, I'd just like to double check on that. There's been some, I guess I've heard some conversations around, and maybe when it was at Booker T, you know, principals need additional support for highly qualified tutors. I know as we did the math specialists, but anything that's going to support direct academic support for any of our schools that are denied warning, perhaps I should say in the Office of School Improvement. And then also if there are opportunities for, you know, there's been some conversations around the gifted program and some others. And again, I'm just saying one-time resources, but I just like to feel better that if we're offering, and I'm just picking this for an example, you know, wireless laptops to go home for the students at Open Campus, that I know that several of our schools that, you know, Lindenwood, Campus Stella, and others who also need technology support. You know, Cox has been offering the Connect to Compete program, and a lot of times the challenge has been that the parents don't have the technology at home. So if there's an opportunity to maybe have a pool that's available to a wider range of students, then, you know, I would ask that we perhaps look at that so that we're not just looking at the students that are trying to come back and get their diploma, but also students that are in elementary school and at other levels that are trying to get the support that they need as well. So those types of thoughts.
Okay. Dr. King?
I'll add that the team had that same discussion, and it's centered on, you know, what are those examples of where we already provide that opportunity in other places? Really the same common thread that you mentioned, and we talked about a couple of those that we already provide, and really the additional technology equipment for Open Campus, that $20,000 amount was designed to provide the opportunity for students to be able to check out a particular unit and have access at home as you were speaking to be able to continue their work, because if you heard in the report, a certain percentage of what they already do really is done after hours outside of Open Campus as well. So it just gives that option for them to be able to check those out, not to hand those units over to them, but they're able to check those out. And we did, again, talk about some other features like this that we are providing at other schools. Now, is it provided 100% of the time across the board at all of these other schools? No. But we're certainly willing to go back and review that to confirm that this breakout is
That's juice.
on point. Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Gabriel, did you have any comments?
I don't have my original budget for Open Campus, but I remember our original discussion around Open Campus revolved a lot around grants that were going to be given, written, based upon that school. And the discussion kind of evolved into, first we have to open up the school before we can apply for the grants. And having this information in front of me right now, I understand the need for wanting the students to be successful in that program. But we have a contract with them, and they are supposed to deliver a certain amount of success. And I don't think it should be contingent on us this particular year giving them extra money towards laptops or other items. I think that let's see what they can do with them, with what they have, with what we can afford for that program. This is just me speaking because I took very much to heart what Ms. Campson said when she was talking about the school turnaround items, and that was having a teacher face-to-face with the student in order to help them improve. And we have so many schools, and I know you said that you all discussed this in your meeting, and I completely respect that, but I am not prepared to support additional funding for Open Campus for students who have decided to drop out of school in lieu of the students that we currently have in school that are struggling. And I don't mean to say that against them. I want to support them. I want to support their endeavors. And I know that there are various reasons why they have made that decision. But for right now, I need to make sure that as a board member that we are supporting as much as we can the students that we currently have enrolled so that they can be successful in what they're doing. So I have reservations, and I'm willing to go back and talk with you about it, enlighten myself about it, but those are my hesitations.
Okay. Reverend Haywood, any thoughts? And then Dr. Stewart, and then we need to wrap it up.
Yeah. When I look at these items, they seem to me to be necessary for the success of the program. And to the extent that these items will help to make that program successful, that's very important to me. And I think that this additional support, I support and think is appropriate.
Sorry, Dr. Stewart, you had spoken earlier. Brad, did you have a comment?
Just a quick one. It's not like we don't support the schools that are priority and focus, the school improvement schools. Because there are extra monies, there's Title I monies, there's SIG monies, there's other monies that go to those, and we've provided that. I don't see the reason by putting this little bit more money into the Open Campus to provide its success is not taken away from anybody else.
Yeah, and I'm just seeing this for the first time, so I just have to, look at it and pull out the color-coded folder that I didn't bring with me today, and take a look at it, so.
Well, let me share with you, because City Council acted recently, I guess, to allocate this.
This past Tuesday,
Right.
the 28th,
Right.
October.
That's why Dr. Houston and I felt like we needed to get it before us as soon as possible, so that's why we're discussing it tonight, knowing that we'd have a discussion, and then we could talk about it next week further. And that the administration would have the opportunity, after the supplemental appropriation being so declared, that there was an opportunity to talk. We did not want it to go for another week and yet another week, because then we'd be into December, frankly.
Right.
Last comment, Dr. Stewart?
Thank you. I have falls into two areas. One is philosophical and precedent setting, and the other is operational and now. The operational and now. I'm not going to use the example of Open Campus. I'm going to say, if there's something that the Academy, the International Baccalaureate Prep Academy, I'm going to invent a new title, a new proposal for a name. If there's something that they need pretty soon, and we have to defer painting the ceiling at Maury in order to give them that when they need it, I'm in favor of that. I'm not pitting open campus against the International Baccalaureate Preparation Academy. What I'm saying is there may be prioritization. With new information comes new decisions. We heard tonight that there are big decisions that need to be made in a timely way, but there may be steps that need to be taken. So if there's something that you, Dr. King, or your colleagues here that relate to the International Baccalaureate Preparation Academy, that all of a sudden now that you weren't aware of before, or, to me, that takes some priority. We're talking 600 to 700 students as opposed to 125 students. And if it means we don't paint a ceiling that no one's going to look up at because we're trying to do something for 600 to 700 students. Oh, yeah.
Ceiling's falling down.
Metaphorically.
No, but maybe it's only $100 we need to paint it. We'll fix the ceiling so it doesn't fall down. Now,
That's what the $450,000 is for, is keep it from falling down on more students.
I'm trying to use an example to avoid pitting
understand, but
open
it's
campus.
hyperbole does not
I'm
help.
trying to use an example to avoid pitting open campus against the Preparation Academy. But the reprioritization could occur because you've heard something tonight, or may hear something, if you ask Mr. Smeagol his opinion. Philosophically, I want to make sure that this is not a precedent-setting event, that the city council doesn't tell us how to spend a supplemental appropriation. We need more supplemental appropriations. So if they take offense to what I'm saying now, well, I don't want them to. But in any event, if they do, then when we ask for other supplemental appropriations, I hope they know that we need to trust the judgment of the superintendent of schools and his staff. And so I just want to clarify that. If Jack was here, he could probably say, no, they don't get to do that. My guess is that's the answer. But philosophically, I have a little worry I need to clarify. But if in the end, Dr. King, you say this is the best use of the money and this is what needs to happen right now, because there's some timing involved in the International Baccalaureate Preparation Academy. Whatever. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Yeah, so Dr. King will wrap it up.
Okay, so, and I think this aligns with what you just said. The facilities improvement at Lafayette, Winona, and repurposing. That particular item is listed there and a figure. So what this will allow us to do, be able to go back and review and receive more feedback and input from you. So we think that based on that input and feedback and talking to the team that adjustments need to be made, then of course it opens the door to do that prior to something. So that it's described there, so it gives us that opportunity.
Thanks for the opportunity to make these comments.
Sure. And we're all just now seeing this for the first time together. Is this posted on board docs, by the way? Have we
No,
posted?
it's
No?
not.
Okay. Okay, so Janelle, can you be sure it is now? Okay, because this is the first time, I think, that all of us have seen this. Yeah, okay, so just to be clear, this is now posted on board docs, and so that we're all aware of it. Okay, Dr. Thornton, any other thoughts, comments on finances?
No, other than, again, council didn't itemize these things for us. We, when the money became available, that's when the decision was made to.
I only know what I read in the paper.
Well,
Okay, very good. Okay, moving forward, we have the master milestones planning.
Dr. Avery, while I do some reading, would you start?
okay. All righty, let's just remember where we started off.
Okay, so everybody has the document, we're on step 5, is that correct? It was on our,
It was in your chair, the document, and plus a little reading.
Yes.
can I just, as a prelude to this, do you have any idea how long you think this will take so that we can have a good expectation of when we might close out our meeting tonight?
I don't want to make an expectation right now. I've waited many hours. I've waited 3 years for this. This is important.
Okay, I'm just noting that it's 7:15. We've all been here since before 1 o'clock, so.
Maybe this was less important than some of the other things we did,
No,
but I don't.
no, I just am noting that simply.
Thanks for asking.
Take it away.
We all discussed 17 items that the board has either taken action on in the past or has had some consensus around. And I'm just going to name the items. They're abbreviated here on the board. Number 1 is to repurpose a new 3 through 8 school. Number 2, to open a new school at Broad Creek. Number 3, to open a new school at Campostella. Number 4, to open a new school at Larchmont. Number 5, to open a new school at Ocean View. Number 6, to open a new school at Camp Allen. Number 7, to open a new CTE high school. Number 8, to complete the K-8 initiative. Number 9, to inaugurate pre-K expansion. Number 10, to inaugurate open campus high school. 11, implement school poverty targets. 12, expand the conversion schools student learning time. 13, implement conversion school charter programs. Conversion schools partnerships. Number 14, implement a demographic study with redistricting. 15, schedule deferred maintenance projects. 16, schedule deferred technology projects. 17, schedule deferred transportation projects. 18, reimagine, reconfigure Madison alternative setting to Norfolk Technical Center. And number 19, I'm sorry, I added 2 more. Conduct an efficiency study. So with that being said, I'm going to let Dr. Stewart begin the discussion.
Why is this important? Because for 6 years, the school board has been saying what it wanted superintendents to do. This is a coherent look at all of that. In every meeting we have a new emphasis on these things. Today we heard the MOU and the turnaround agenda principles are reflected up here. We're going to sign an MOU next month saying some of the things that are reflected up here if we decide to go with them. Last spring, the judge judging the OEI case that said it's unconstitutional and that the state doesn't get to take over our schools said, is that the only thing that you can think about doing is taking over the schools? Is there anything else you can do to help? Perhaps up here are some things that we know might help. And for 2 years, the city council has asked us for a real estimate of what we really need to help the students learn, particularly in the case that for the past 7 years, we've had devastating economic situations that has caused poverty to grow and increase for our students, putting more hardship on our students, therefore more difficulty. So, to review, this is not a decision. This is not a vote to go with it. This is what people said they understood. Did they understand these items? This was the number of people who said they did. And the second, these are the people that supported those items. Over here, first we had yellow stickums, then we had green stickums. Here's a review of what we decided last time. Before we go on to the next thing, that somebody's considering funding for CT. I'm just going to leave that. We know what I'm talking about. That the first round was completed for the K-8 and that several folks want to keep it open if we ever want to go back to another K-8 school. But right now, maybe we're done for now. That the pre-K, that the superintendent by January, Christmas time is going to be very busy in the King household, that by January will provide options for how pre-K4 can be expanded. That the open campus school, we see we're getting additional money for that, is a plan for growth and improvements. We know we need to improve it. We have already done that maybe for this new supplemental. Poverty targets, that the superintendent by January again, working in coordination with the Dijon recommendations, will provide options for considering how poverty targets can be begun for consideration in the city of Norfolk. And there's not to like it's not research related to all of that. It's not like it's not research related to pre-K. Learning time. I'm not just talking about starting school early. We're talking about Saturday school, after school, whole variety of options. But again, by January, the superintendent will provide us options. Now, why by January? Because this will inform our decisions on budget items. It's critical to have those items. And that partnerships are not only going to be for those schools that are under question, the schools that are under need, but the partnerships are going to be for all schools, but at least for sure for those schools. And that we need we're having further meetings now related to the John Richter study, so there may come, by January, probably not, but maybe shortly thereafter, some recommendations from the superintendent regarding redistricting. So now we have some other items we haven't dealt with yet. So because you have in front of you this sheet, which is a summary of what we all have the opportunity to make comments on, and we have several items left, Madison and the efficiency study are outliers. These three are deferred items. I'll read one comment that was written for one of them. It said, this is another complex item because each year there is more needs that are deferred. The economy went south. The city was required to defer. Therefore, the school system deferred. And again, I emphasize with the big emphasis, had it not been for the City Council of Norfolk, we could not have done what we did. They made up for the state deserting us and shifting costs to localities. They made up for the federal government deserting us, shifting costs and denying costs. So they have done a fantastic job, but still there are maintenance, technology, and transportation costs that have been deferred. Dr. King, I don't doubt your colleagues present you what they need, but what I want to make sure of before my time is up, did you really tell us all you need? Because what can happen? We found out tonight there is such a thing as a supplemental appropriation. That supplemental appropriation can occur at any time. Can occur for any reasons, particularly for deferred maintenance, it's one-time expense. Deferred technology, one-time expense. Deferred transportation, one-time expense. That makes room in the budget for annual operating expenses. That's critical because we can't do it all every year. So I think what's really important at this particular time is to, and I don't think there's anything you can do by January, Dr. King. I think Christmas has got to come sometime in your household. But I think right now, from my standpoint, and then I'm going to shut up on this and let each colleague have the opportunity to say anything on deferred maintenance, deferred technology, deferred transportation, and then we'll go to the Madison School. And I really want to make sure, before my time is up, that we know all that you need so that we tell the city all that they need. They've got to know what's really real. So I'm just going to go around. Sorry to start with you, Dr. Robinson, but any comments you want to say on deferred maintenance, technology, and transportation that you didn't already put down here?
Not anything else. Okay.
Mr. Jordan.
I'd like to take it at this time.
Dr. Gabriel.
I'm just going to reiterate what I had said for point 16, was that I know that we have a policy committee now, and the bring your own device policy is present in many other school districts, and at this point in time, if we can help to alleviate some of our technology burden by allowing other students to bring their devices in, that would be great.
Any comments related to deferred maintenance, deferred technology, and deferred transportation?
On maintenance, I do know, Dr. King, that you and your team will be coming forward in, I think, December we might see the 5-year CIP, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Rex putting together an updated version? So that will help support knowing what the full figure is that we can share with the community and all, so that they understand what maintenance needs we have, at least for 5 years out.
And the reason for deferral was good. The city didn't have it because they were making up for the state and the federal government deserting us.
But we still need to communicate it to
Yes.
the community what it is. And I think that
We do.
having an updated document will be very helpful to support this communication.
Anything on technology or transportation?
All right, Dr. Stewart, if I can go back.
Please,
Just
please.
a question for you. The deferred technology projects and deferred transportation projects, does that include support staff that may be required as projects unfold, or is it just strictly on the physical side?
I think you ought to say anything that comes to your mind, but if it's personnel, then it has to go in annual operating. Just to respond, not necessarily to answer your question, but if it's a one-time supplemental, then that starts to make way for that. So, make any statements. I think you ought to.
So then my comment would be that we make sure we align the operational budget side with anything that we address with technology and transportation on the supplemental side. So Dr. Gabriel, for example, mentioned to bring your own device.
Right.
So if we were to go down that path and the administration said in order for us to go down that path, it's going to require personnel supports, I think we need to have an understanding of that so that we don't find ourselves,
You're now speaking mostly to technology?
well, or transportation, or any of them, just saying
All
in
right,
general,
all right.
that there's some alignment there.
Help me summarize so we can capture it, so it doesn't get lost. Align,
Yeah, align our supplemental with our operational needs.
I wrote, remember, a dyslexic can misspell anything, and I can misspell op, too. Align supplemental with operational. Is that,
That can be applied to maintenance as well. I mean, we
Yes,
can
yeah.
build these buildings and then we can't.
Yeah, well, that's where I
what
kind of put it
Right.
in the middle. Anything else?
We hope so, yes.
Yeah.
That is true.
Anything else, Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Doyle, anything
Nope,
else?
I'm good.
Dr. King, is that something that will jog your memory in the event that we need to talk about this letter? Notice there's no green stickum, therefore no January action item.
Sure. And just know that, and the team is has been working on 6 of these items already,
Right.
as we discussed. So,
Right.
and have already moved forward with that. So, and these, of course, are not included in those 6 as of yet.
Just a word about why it's on a board, why, so everybody can see it, understand and support. And the people that need to understand and support all of this are the people who are out there watching this on TV, or the parents, the children. Everybody needs to understand that these are all things that could do what the judge said the state ought to be doing, that could meet the MOU that we're going to sign, that could do what the transformational initiatives say we ought to be doing. These are all things together. No further comments on this. Remember what could happen. Under maintenance, technology, and transportation, when we finally look at it, it could be that a supplemental appropriation, one-time spending, could clear the way in the annual operating budget, Mr. Jordan, to allow for personnel expenditures to do what needs to be done. I'm going to jump now to Madison and Dr. Robinson. That was your item, and you got to choose the verb. I know you.
I don't care.
Okay.
You
Then
can
let's
put
say-
down whatever verb you want to put down.
I don't want to use reimagine, but to
Repurpose.
reconsider, repurpose. Your idea was that we have something at Madison, and we've got to look at not only the where Madison is located, because it's right in a growth pattern, where the real estate could pull revenue into the city for other things, but we also have to look at the whole operation, the whole Madison program, right?
That's why I agree with Mr. Jordan when his comment was we should task the superintendent and the administration to come back with a proposal on what we should do with Madison. It was just my idea to use the grounds at the technical center as the CTE came on board. It'd be a perfect spot for it. But as I think I agree with Mr. Jordan that we should just let the superintendent.
Let's get reactions from everyone. Would everyone support asking the superintendent, not with a January date yet on it, no date on it yet, but asking the superintendent to make recommendations for repurposing, reimagining, redesigning, making Madison more of what we want it to be. Mr. Jordan?
Well, my comment was, alternative education. What I've heard Dr. King speak to is broader than Madison, and Madison may be one piece of that, but that was my thought on that.
And so that would be one thing we would want Dr. King to think about, how
Correct.
broad we want this existing program to become if we redid it. Dr. Gabriel, anything in regards to this?
No, I think that's an excellent idea to have Dr. King and his staff come back with a recommendation for that.
For what Madison could become and where it might be.
Right,
and
that's
everything
suited.
else.
I agree likewise.
I'm with Rodney. I like Dr. King having that vision of what is alternative education. What's the vision for that?
Just an example, one of the most prominent schools up on the hill in Charlottesville, Virginia, is given that prominent location, and they place that much importance on it in the city of Charlottesville. So, Dr. King, is there a date that you would want to have the luxury to provide this to this school board? And I wouldn't call January.
No, not January.
And I got a green sticky here, so I'm going to put the green sticky up there. What would be a date that you think that you could bring back some ideas for us to consider, knowing that we would want to consider it before our budget closes out, perhaps, if there was anything for the coming budget cycle. It could be that your recommendation is that this be deferred, given all the other things we're trying to do. When would you want to give us some reaction to this?
Well, considering the budget cycle, it would have to be, January is too tight. We probably would think in February, March.
And you could come to us and say, I can't do it this budget cycle, I recommend it. So can I put February, Dr. King, February? Thank you so much. You can spell February. F-E-B.
March sounded better.
All right, March.
March it is.
March.
Now we're down to the
March.
efficiency.
The Ides of March, right?
Ms. Doyle returned to something that was very critical several years ago before any of us were on the board. And would you speak to that now and what you would hope to accomplish by
So
that?
there was a parent in the community who brought to my attention that there was an efficiency study done, that the division contracted with MGT because the Department of Education had contracted with MGT to do this for divisions within Virginia in terms of looking at their efficiency. And I'm not talking about building use. I'm talking about the use of their funding and their financial resources. Now, people, processes, and technologies came into that, and buildings perhaps too, but it was the budget. So a recommendation could be, have we implemented all that was recommended, if it still even applies? This was long before Dr. King.
Right.
It was like, I don't know, interim and previous and interim before.
Long before us.
Yeah.
Right.
So things may not even apply, but if not, should we consider doing another one? Just so that we are being fiscally responsible and good stewards of the money afforded to us by federal, state, and local.
My question, Dr. King, I would put a date beyond the budget cycle on this.
Yeah.
To review and recommend, on the yellow sticker, review and recommend MGT study.
Or an efficiency study of some kind. MGT
Yeah.
happened to be the
And the
vendor
reason
this
why,
time.
Dr. King, is this was pretty extensive. It was pretty serious 4 years ago when people were talking about it in the newspaper, and it was pretty serious when I first came on the board. And there may be something tucked away in there that you could easily see important, and that could get back to the deferred maintenance of it all. And can we put a date of, like, post-budget, like May, April?
Just for clarity, I think you may be talking about two different MGT
I think I am.
studies. Yeah, one was.
Let's do them both.
One was dealing with the buildings.
Right. That's not the one I'm
That's not the
talking
one
about.
she's referring to.
That's not the one you're referring to.
She's talking about another.
Our
the
fiscal house.
Fiscal.
Yeah.
Piece of it.
Which is the one that Dr. Thornton
Yes.
commented on.
Yes.
That's been involved in.
You want to put an April date or a May date on that, just to make sure, there are two. We've kind of ignored the other one, but I'm not going
And
to
so
bring it up now.
when you say that, you say you are speaking in terms of being ready to bring a recommendation
No.
around this, or be ready to implement a
What Ms. Doyle
efficiency
said
study,
was,
or?
Ms. Doyle said, just take a look at it and see if there's something in it that,
If there's anything that applies that we should be doing.
Oh,
And
take
if
a look
not,
at it. Okay.
is there an opportunity for us to do another efficiency study that's under the King administration? Because again, this is an old document. It may not be relevant, and should there be one under you, focusing on the same?
we put April, May, and just review and recommend, and Mr. Jordan reminded the 68-year-old that I connected this to another study that has been tucked away and not dealt with, but in any event. So we'll put this up
Study
here.
that.
Could I make a comment on that?
Please.
I would try to speed up the review of that, because there may be things in that first study that we could utilize to prepare for our budget talks on the upcoming budget.
What date would you propose, what date would you suggest?
Thanks.
To review the current study and give recommendations on anything that we, say February.
Yes, sir. Dr. King, do you think that's doable?
I would defer to the chief financial officer.
Dr. Thornton, you are being deferred to.
The immortal Dr. Thornton.
In terms,
We're looking at you right now.
in terms of reviewing the old efficiency study that was done here, an amount of time for a committee or a designee in your department to be able to do that, to determine implications for whether a new one needs to be done or whether the division did everything that was in that old study that was done years ago? How much time do you think you need for that?
We can look and see what the recommendations were, and I can let you know.
Okay. Okay.
I know based on my initial review of it,
Right.
in response to a question from Ms. Doyle few months ago now.
Yes.
The most significant recommended cost savings were related to doing some outsourcing. I'm talking, but I'll share with the board.
You want to put a date on it, or we want to leave it?
Privatizing, I call it outsourcing, but privatizing some operational functions. But I'll share, I'll get back with Dr. King and the board.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm going to stick this up here with no date. So in final review, for 6 years, the school board has said, yep, we're going to do this, and asked a series of superintendents to consider it. You are finally putting all this together. The MOU says we're going to do things, the school board's going to do things. That meets the MOU. Transformation requirements said school board's going to put more time. This is being considered here. Judge, who said, is that the only thing you do, take away schools from Norfolk? These are some things that could answer that judge's question. And the city council asks us, is this what you really need? So right here, we have some items, and the reason why it's on a board is so that everybody can understand and support what may happen. If these things were to occur, and if by January we could consider all of this, in my humble opinion, this would be a big deal, on top of what the other big deals that are going on. And I'm grateful to have this opportunity after 3 years to try and create a coherent school board initiative for the next school board that will come beginning July 1. Thank you very much for the honor of the opportunity to do this. Dr. Gabriel, you want to close it out with anything? Dr. Robinson, any closing comments or anything that we're missing here?
No, looks good to me.
Rodney?
Yeah,
Mr. Jordan?
I'd just like to ask the two of you, just in terms of flexibility for the administration to prioritize what we've prioritized. So we
Okay.
heard earlier about
Gotcha.
MOUs and essential actions,
Okay.
and what can we take off the plate, and that's a lot of stuff that we're asking to be done in addition to that. That if there are things that fit very well with the academic focus that they have, that maybe they can come back and say, these are the things
Right.
that we would like to really tackle now, and give them the flexibility to come back and say that maybe some others that
Certainly agree with that.
we can push out later.
Much may come from this, I don't see, and much may come from, as Dr. King considers the learning time for the pre-K and now, I mean, there's so much in this. And then Dr. Thornton has to keep us apprised of what the state has in mind for cutting funding for education in out years. So, anything else? Any closing comments? Dr. Gabriel, closing comments on master milestones at this time?
Just excited that we're doing this. It just feels like it's a good plan coming together.
Reverend?
No comment.
Final word?
Good. So, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Gabriel, thank you for leading the charge on that. What we'll be sure to do is look at our January agendas and our time on those agendas so that we can start hearing from Dr. King administration. Right. And Mr. Jordan, I do agree with you, too. I think we need to be very reasonable with our expectations, knowing that we need to be sure we're prioritizing our work appropriately.
Thank you.
So, I do have one thing that I'm going to close out with before the end, but is there anything else that anybody would like to share for the greater good before we end our meeting today? Dr. King, let me first ask Dr. King. Dr. King, is there anything you'd like to?
No, nothing further.
Okay. 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 Yeah, I know. Uncle, okay. Dr. Stewart, briefly, what do you have to say?
I will miss the next meeting. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, that was good, wasn't it? Okay, I do have one very important matter tomorrow is Reverend Haywood's birthday.
Oh.
Happy birthday.
All right.
Happy
all
birthday.
right.
Have a great day. We will be thinking about you, and you will get all sorts of texts saying, we hope you have a great day. Yeah. So having said that, thank you all for the very good work today, and I appreciate all the administration that still remains here in the room. And for those that are viewing, thank you for your patience of being with us all day as well. So have a good day, everybody. Have a good night.